Hello, hello, hello. Beast Tales. That's funny. Anyway, my YouTube. Yapping and prepping time. Say hello. Right, say hello. Happy to be here. I'm yapping and prepping for a debate tomorrow. If you got time, swing by and say hello. Yes, I am here. We are here. I'm going to be going through going through a debate in regards to my debate tomorrow on a relevant topic that I'll be going over. And then basically, I'm just going to go through the video, go through the debate, and I will make comments here and there and just basically give my thoughts so that I can begin to understand where I want to be, the kind of mindset that I'm in when it comes to the topic of discussion, as well as any other random thoughts that I guess come into my head while I'm talking about things. Uh, I'm in a new. This is a somewhat new. It's a new thing for me. It's not. I'm not used to this because I honestly don't stream as often as I should be. That's why I am not nervous. The word is nervous. I don't stream often, so being on camera will always drum up nerves when it comes to being on camera and stuff like that, even if it's by one's own making. Um but this should be fun and no fun. This should be fun, and for anybody that happens to come through here and wants to interact, I'm glad that you're here. Uh and we shall and I would like to and let's go and we can start going through this. Anyway, I do have a debate tomorrow. It is on SpeakEazy's channel. You can check in the description under the live stream itself, and it'll be there. You can see me. I've been on SpeakEazy's channel a couple of times at this point, usually for verbal combats, or usually at this point it's been for verbal combats. And I think one time I was on an after panel after a debate on the very debate that I'm about to watch, that we're about to watch here on stream, that I'm going to be going through. Uh, this should be fun. As the debate goes on, I will have my thoughts, and I will be expressing them and I will be expressing them. Uh, the topic of debate for tomorrow that I'm going to be going over, that I will be arguing for, is the question of, does systemic racism exist in the United States of America? I'm currently on the it does not side, the negative side, and it was a fortunate coincidence that the debate that I'm about to watch right now, is tied directly into the topic that I'm going to be going over. And I don't really have much to say. I don't really have much to say outside of, whatever these beginning outside these beginning thoughts of mine of just starting the stream, because frankly I just hit record, and not record, but hit go live, and now I'm here. I think this is basically a study session. This is a study session that I'm on live for, and will be gathering my thoughts. I already have a lot of thoughts gathered already on a separate tab in terms for basic notes on what I'm going to be going over. But I would I want to see about trying to go through a debate live on stream, and just basically give my thoughts on the arguments presented. This is going to be jumbled because I tend to be a rambler, but I also see this as practice for getting myself to put together my thoughts in a comprehensive and, more importantly, a succinct manner, because I know that I tend to ramble like I'm doing right now. This is all frankly to fill dead air, also a whole bunch of nerves, too self-aware. But anyway, yeah. Anywho, I think I've yapped on long enough. We can basically just start on.
Ready for your opening statement.
Now, I do have this debate on, what do I have it on, a sped up, yeah, on 1.4 times speed, because I tend to listen pretty well, and be able to catch things. And also, I guess on my own time, I listen to things on much faster speeds, because it's easier for me to get through long form videos when they're sped up. Like, I can still listen, and people enunciate quite well, to the point where I enunciate well enough that I'm able to catch it. So while if there's anybody in here that says that may come in and says, "Oh wow, this guy is listening to it really really quickly and needs to slow it down," it'll be considered. How about that? It'll be considered. So I skipped ahead about a minute in. This is soon after introductions and whatnot. So yeah, here we go.
Runs 2 YouTube channels, Counterpoints 40K, covering Warhammer and sci-fi weapon breakdowns, and Counterpoints Politics as well, where he engages in online political debates and works towards building a center coalition. Both channels can be found in the description. And with that being said, we are going to get into the opening statements. We're going to start with the affirmative. So Marte, whenever you're ready for your opening.
I figured this is React slop essentially. I'm being real meta at the moment, but I figured still though, this is all going to be like commentary as I listen to it and whatnot, and this is very relevant to the debate topic that I will be having tomorrow, which is why we're in here, so that's cool.
Opening statement, and I know you had some things you wanted to present, so just let me know what you want to present and when, and I'll start the timer up with your voice.
I did. Go ahead and play the video, and then afterwards show the image.
Okay, so you'll have to play the video, but so I'll put it up
although
here.
You live here, I want you to know as mayor, you're not welcome here. And the day you move out of the city will be the day that I launch a parade celebrating the fact that you moved out of the city. Because you are not somebody who believes in coexistence. You're somebody who tries to preach it, but in fact you do everything but that. So I just want to put that on the record.
We need ICE out of our city so that we can continue to focus on the strategies that have been working to drive violent crime down. And today we are signing an executive order aimed at reining in this out-of-control administration. The order establishes ICE-free zones.
White people are racist. So
I don't think I should stop the video. I shouldn't stop the video, but it's just as I think of the ways to rebut, ways to understand. I should be against. I not should be, but I am against the existence of systemic racism in America as of today, simply because of this is a great first video because this talks about it right here. This goes into it right here. Systemic racism, systemic racism, as it was previously and has been previously defined and continues to come up as a problem, is the fact that, you know, black people or people of color, you know, Hispanics, Asians, and whatnot, they encounter moments in society where, excuse me, where it would seem that whatever they come up with, whatever it's situation that they come up with, whether it's and usually for the negative, yeah, there are run-ins with law enforcement or run-ins with law enforcement or not lapses, but rejections in career or rejections in education. A lot of the time, and what seems to be the times that catch on to mainstream media most often are times when these people cry out systemic racism, or the fact that they were being racist towards me for whatever reason. And it's like the whole point of the stop was it would be written in the law that if you are suspected of something, the police are allowed to detain you. Detain, not arrest. And even if it was arrest, if it's found that there's nothing to see, then there's really no reason to feel any sort of anxiety that something bad will happen, especially if you're in a blue state. But let's continue on.
I put this up because I really want any white person in the room to know up front that this is what we're dealing with, that it's not going to be this coddling of white tears. And what that looks like, we're not going to discuss, oh, maybe some of us have worked it out. No, you're always going to be racist, actually. So even when...
How can there be systemic racism? And this is going to be basically the key point of how against there being the existence of systemic racism to begin with. How can there really be systemic racism when things like this, when things like this exist in just society on the regular? Anyway.
You're on your path to trying to figure out how to be a better human being, because I believe that white people are born into not being human. Like that actually.
That is hilarious, bro. That is the most ironic thing when you're saying this. You are actually literally brainwashing the very people that you are saying are part of the problem. You are fulfilling your own destiny and fulfilling your own solution to all white people are racist. You're essentially creating the solution to the problems that you are also creating. It's a mind fuck of circular self-fulfilling prophecy.
instead of people of color and black folks being dehumanized, that actually everyone is dehumanized off rip within white supremacy, that y'all are born into a life to not be human, and that's what y'all are taught to do, to be demons.
Also, note the size of the woman, by the way. Note the size of the speaker. And she's asking for a PayPal. God damn it, man.
So in this particular way, white people are all racist.
First of all, there's no such thing as white culture.
Exactly what is white culture? There's no white culture.
They're not only trying to raise up minorities and make sure the playing field is even, they're trying to take down the white culture.
Okay, you can take this off and remove it. Mind you, that's being sold on Amazon as well too. So right here we see a graph presented by Pew Research as well too. DEI practices are racist towards white people. Not only is this a form of oppression, but it degrades education and the value of education. We can take this off the screen now too. So when we think about politically moving forward, Brandon Johnson wants ICE-free zones, thus allowing illegal immigrants to live in his city, telling federal agents where they can't live. Counterpoints, I understand that you used to work in law enforcement. I did too. 13 plus years, different agencies. It's another conversation, neither here nor there. I know you're going to bring up your military background, all the other stuff. I don't want to hear it. We're just here for this debate. So back to this. Hey, I just want to make a proclamation. White people out there, I'm talking to you. Where have your balls gone? For the love of God, can we end the multiculturalism already? I don't like this. I don't feel safe. It makes me upset. White people and Asians have created.
Now, I understand that it's hard to hear Marte's voice right now because his mic is essentially just peaking peaking to the max. His mic quality does get better right after this. So, but for the sake of understanding, but the thing is I can hear him right now, so I can at least understand what he's saying at this point.
The greatest technology, greatest societies, and the greatest economies, the greatest infrastructure in all of human history. We are now between 8 to 10% of the world's population, and you're importing infinity brown people into our culture and country, Europe included. You all brought into the globalist agenda, and you let women vote. Two of the biggest mistakes ever made, the greatest errors in modern society. White people used to be feared and more respected in culture, and on the global level, whites had the greatest empires in human history. Now they're getting arrested for sending memes by Muslim apologists through police arm of the state now. There's no rough edge anymore. Do you know how many white people get in my comments and tell me and say, oh my gosh, Marte, you say everything I wish I could say, but I can't because I'm white. Why not? Why? Literally just say it. Just say what you gotta say. White silence is taking a hold of American society as a form of propaganda, speech impression. So
He's right, by the way. Marte is correct, because what have we seen around all over, like, what have we seen all, you know what? I'm thinking of whether or not I should start the stream on Twitch as well. I'm just now thinking this, but it'll be later. Anyway, go away. That's okay. Anyway, he's right, by the way, because you go around. What have we constantly seen about white people and racism in America for the longest time? And by the longest time, I'm of course referring to myself, because I've been on this earth for over a quarter of a century at this point. What the constant thing is, whites are racist, but for black people to be racist versus whites, the term is reverse racism. And we're told that reverse racism doesn't exist because how you can't be the prevailing narrative, the prevailing reason, the justification is that you can't be racist towards white people. You can't. And the reason you can't be racist towards white people is simply because you can't be racist towards white people because white people were the ones that set up these systems that benefited them to begin with. And if they were the ones that set up all of these oppressive systems that keep minorities down, they have no room to cry the very problems that they themselves, quote unquote, have propagated. They just can't because They were the ones that made it. Now this is the bed that they made, so now they have to lie in it, which is a fallacy because basically it's like, oh, white people can't call racism on themselves. They can't call that a black person is being racist to a white person, or decry reverse racism and whatnot, which is it's stupid because it's all racism at the end of the day. They can't cry that. It's discrimination, not full-blown racism, because they were the ones in power, therefore it'd be punching down. So they're just reinforcing the very thing that they say that they would be against. They're punching down. Again, it comes from racism is a prejudice plus power definition, which is fallacious in its own right, considering it's fallacious in its own right, considering that we're literally seeing the opposite happen in real time, where minorities are getting all of the power, all of the influence, and they are then imposing their influence and power onto white people in the form of being minorities. They're weaponizing their own minority status onto the majority, onto white people. Hence, creating the cycle and propagating this cycle where they may not be the majority, but they hold so much societal and cultural influence that they might as well be the majority, at least in culture. Anyway.
Identity is only here just to be an American. That's it, not black or anything else. You know what makes me upset is when I see ungrateful brown people getting on the internet and taking bold statements and talking crazy about my society that was established, built, and maintained by white people and white immigrants and Asian immigrants. And they want to talk down on our society and Western civilization as if they come from somewhere that's beautiful and prosperous and they have it all figured out. They've been murdering each other mercilessly and senselessly, having blood views for thousands of years. They haven't developed anything that they run from. Women are treated like animals in their culture, and we can go into that as well too. They have no rights. They're just barbaric animals. And then to think that they have the audacity to come tell white people where everybody wants to go, where white people live. Everybody wants to go where white people maintain society and civilization and infrastructure. Everybody does. Counterpoints. They come to your home, white people, and then they tell you, oh, you need to make things how we have it. Then you need to change the rules for us. No, I'm starting to genuinely feel unsafe in society. You know who I do feel safe around? Kyle, Blake, Kevin, Christina, Chloe, Rebecca, Thomas. You know who I don't feel safe around? Somalians. Categorically, Venezuelan gangs that take over apartment buildings, large groups of Hispanic men that infiltrate this country, and don't speak a lick of English. White people, please, for the sake of Western civilization, grab your sacks, grab your nuts, and remember who the hell you are. Stop with the empathy, man. We've had enough of this. You know what energy we need? Like SpeakEazy was playing, boastful energy, because I'm sick of it. White people, please. I don't want to see any more Mohammeds anywhere. We need a coalition against this. So you know what I'm veering from culturally, and the reason I veer from blacks? Your generation of white American men were told the last 80 years were a problem. People who look like you and live like you, they were part of the problem, and that all you need to do is get past racism together. And that if you could pull it off, if you could get past racism, if you could learn to live in a colorblind society, that all things would be better for all of us. And so you were the first generation raised with a true post-racial mindset. And if you started to reach adulthood, you walked out, put your hand forward, and shake the hands of every other race, every other group, and every other religion, and you let infiltrate this country, and you were immediately sucker punched by reality.
Very true. We do live in a post-racial society, post-Civil War, Civil Rights Act society of 1964, post-Civil Rights Act era. We live in a culture where we were told from birth, from the very beginning, do not see race, do not see color. We are all Americans under the same flag. Now I'm starting to get heated. Now I'm starting to hit my stride. We are all told from birth, if you're a Gen Xer, Millennial, Gen Z, Zoomer, what have you, and to a certain extent the Boomers, but they're at this point they're way past trying to learn anything new. But from birth, we are told that color does not matter. The color does not matter. You should not look at each other as color. We are all Americans under the same flag of the United States, of the 50 stars and 50 states. And the red, white, and blue. That is number one. You do not see color. We don't try to see race for any kind, and we are told that essentially it's just bad to be. I'm repeating myself because it boggles my mind, and I'm getting used to trying to articulate my thoughts in a setting that it would be on. I'm being super meta. Anyway, going back, it's We live in a world where the consistent narrative is don't look at your neighbor as with the color of their skin as the first thing you see in their mind and how you judge them. You judge them by the content of their character. You judge them by what they do. You judge them by what they bring to the table. You know, something meritocracy, something. How can you scratch my back kind of thing. That's it though. But that's completely the right way to look at society. That is the way to beat things like systemic racism. That's why it doesn't exist. It's because we've all grown up learning and understanding that we should not look at our neighbor for the color of their skin, but simply because they're our neighbor. They're an American. They are a fellow worker, a colleague, a loved one. That's who they are. They're not a black man, a black woman, a white man, a white woman, Asian, Hispanic. They're not a Palestinian. They're not a Pakistani. They're not an Israeli. There's not a white. You know, they are not their national origin. They are not their race. They are a person. So to claim that systemic racism continues to exist to this day is fallacious and goes completely against everything that this movement was trying to dismantle, was trying to teach out of society. To say that systemic racism continues to exist, to say that racism continues to exist on a systemic level at this point is antithetical to the whole point of the Civil Rights Act and the Civil Rights Movement as a whole. Because essentially, you're saying that the efforts of all of those people from back then amounted to nothing. Amounted to, well, they didn't fix it. It's not done yet. At which point, the question then becomes, okay, you say that systemic racism still exists here in America. What's left? We already got the anti-discrimination bill. We already got the codified language that says you cannot discriminate based on race. You can't. In a public setting, in a private setting, what have you, you cannot discriminate based on race. That just, you can't do, they got to come up with something different. Got to come up with an actual legitimate reason as for why this person, man or woman, can or cannot do something in a space. The whole reason for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was to tackle this specific issue. It's codified in the language. Like, where is it right now? The Civil Rights Act. I have it pulled up right here. Give me a second here. Just quickly. This I have it highlighted, or it was previously highlighted right here. Basically, in Title II, the Injunctive Relief Against Discrimination in Places of Public Accommodation, Section 202, Section A. All persons shall be entitled to the full and equal enjoyment of the goods, services, facilities, and privileges, advantages, and accommodations of any place of public accommodation as defined in this section without discrimination or segregation on the ground of race, color, religion, or national origin. Now, I would think that this particular passage will be extremely relevant in my debate for tomorrow, because I mean, why wouldn't it be? This passage right here, this passage right here, amongst anything else, and there are other ones as well, you know, ones that follow, but this passage right here that we can go over in a little bit sets up the entire debate right here. This addresses systemic racism directly, and signifies that in America, it does not. This is the legal codification of if you are an American citizen, which started with the 14th Amendment, basically giving all the blacks, all the previously freed slaves, citizen status, which is now being debated because of illegal immigration, but that's a separate topic. People who were previously here, but as a slave, as a previously owned slave, now living as a free man or free woman in the United States, was basically the pathway to citizenship for those people. The 14th Amendment was the stepping stone to this passage right here. Without discrimination or segregation on the ground of race, color, religion, or national origin. This right here is the direct accounting and direct tackling of systemic racism. This and Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. But with this, systemic racism was all but solved. Now, one could argue that culture didn't follow this codification. Culture did not follow this, not at least not immediately, right after this was codified. It didn't, like, the after effects of this law did not smooth out. Did not smooth itself out until after about 20 or 30 years of this law being engaged. Even says, later on in section A, section 1, any inn, motel, hotel, motel, or other establishment which provides lodging to transient guests other than an establishment located within a building which contains not more than 5 rooms for rent or hire and which is actually occupied by the proprietor of such establishment as his residence. Each of the establishments which serves the public is a place of public accommodation within the meaning of this title if its operations affect commerce or if discrimination or segregation by it is supported by state action. So any inn, hotel, motel, places to sleep, basically, places to eat, places of retail and resource acquisition such as gasoline, movie theaters and entertainment halls, physically located within the premises of any establishment otherwise covered by this subsection, or 2 within the premises of which physically located by any such establishment. Yeah, and this Title 2, basically, was the direct address of systemic racism in America. Because it was after this when segregation was outlawed, and anyone of any race, religion, color, national origin, as in the language, was allowed to go anywhere and do anything. This was basically saying, if you are a citizen of this country, you are allowed to go anywhere, do anything, participate in any job, participate in any school, and you will be fine. You are fine. So, for there to really be any sort of systemic racism after the passing of this bill, you'd have to tell me what is not addressed here. What part of the system? Because we now there's representation everywhere in American culture. It might not be a majority, it might not even be 50-50. But that's arguable, debatable, and not the point. Because what this really addressed, what the civil rights movement really addressed when it came to fighting systemic racism in America, was the lack of opportunity. That was what it was. It was the lack of opportunity afforded to whites, lack of opportunity afforded to blacks and other minorities in America that whites got to enjoy. Whites were able to, it was basically codified, within the language, through Jim Crow and Reconstruction South, that whites got all the better shit and blacks simply got the also-ran shit. That wasn't a, what am I thinking of here? That wasn't, it was an unspoken rule, but it was a hierarchical rule that people just understood at the time. They didn't understand that what was happening was black people, Hispanics, Asians, people who were not white were being snubbed of opportunity that they could otherwise that would otherwise have been available to them if they were white. That's what I wanted to say. They were snubbed of opportunities, advancements, places of influence. They would normally be snubbed of these opportunities in favor of someone who looks like the type, someone who looks like the rest of the workplace or populace, aka looks like a white person, looks like a white guy. And the civil rights movement was out to combat such things. Whether it was criminal with, the treatment between a white criminal and a black criminal, and the fact that, most policemen who happened to be white at the time would treat white people better than they would treat black criminals for the same crime. That equality quote unquote equality or equity in treatment was part of the system that was racist at the time. All this act did, and the subsequent the civil rights movement and the Civil Rights Act of 1964, what that did, and the narrative that would proceed afterward, was basically saying, hey, in America, we are all Americans first. We are all people who, under the Constitution of the United States, are blooded Americans. Much like to say that we are all humans under the law, under the culture, under the country. If you are here living in this country as a citizen of the United States, you should be granted access, advantage, and opportunity to pursue whatever you like, without having to worry that the color of your skin is holding you back. Something that is hereditary, something that you can't change. It basically gave everybody the chance to be great. Truly, the chance to be great. This resulted in integration and desegregation, basically, and was forced mixing of thought processes, of cultures. And one can debate, and one can, we're going to go back to the debate soon, but a forced mixing of cultures in a sort of culture clash, which was rough around the edges when this law was first passed, which makes sense. But after the rough patch of setting everything up, we get to the 80s and 90s and 2000s where largely it didn't exist. It stopped existing. Anyway, going back to the debate. Yeah.
Everybody else made it clear that they're not striving for a post-racial society. They didn't want this at all. They want to fight over your corpse. They didn't want equality. They want your stuff. Right now, to be a white man in America, you have to be out loud, expressively okay with the idea that in 50 years, your entire lineage, your entire bloodline, your entire cultural history won't exist I'm not going to apologize for the achievements of white ancestors as a black man. I'm not going to apologize because white people build a world better than theirs. Whites took a land made of stick huts and bison chasers and turned it into a country that put a man on the fucking moon in less than 200 years.
Like, we live in a world where we're demonizing the very accomplishments that white people were able to achieve for humanity. And we're calling it systemic racism when a black person wasn't the one to do it. Like, come on, man.
They need everything that these people are fleeing their homelands of thousands of years to come and deliver DoorDash to. I'll end with this. In a nation built in the melting pot idea where immigrants historically assimilated into an American way of life, we now face a dangerous inversion. Newcomers demanding that we bend to their cultures, eroding the very fabric of our shared identity. Consider Dearborn, Michigan, home of America's largest Arab and Native American community, where cultural enclaves have led to resistance against traditional assimilation, with some rejecting core American frameworks in favor of maintaining distinct forms that challenge national unity. All of this has everything with Euro-American culture. In New York City, a beacon of diversity, immigration groups have formed insulated neighborhoods like those in Queens or Brooklyn, where demands for multilingual services, ethnic preferred policies, and cultural accommodations from halal food mandates in schools to resistance against English primacy shift the burden onto host society, prioritizing foreign traditions over integration. I'm about to end with this. This pattern repeats in cities like Minneapolis, Somali communities pushing for Sharia-inspired dispute resolutions, or Miami's Cuban enclaves influencing local politics and their homeland ideologies. All this is bad, by the way, counterpoints. All while Native American-born Americans are expected to adapt to their culture. Let us not fool ourselves with promises of reparations as a panacea for cultural grievances. Look at Canada's Indigenous peoples, where billions of...
That was a lot to say, but in basic understanding, Marte is basically saying that we're seeing a reverse of culture, rather than there being a country under one unified banner, that we are all Americans. Under the United States Constitution, we have a whole bunch of these groups that are trying to establish enclaves and places within America where they're not being American. They're not America first. They are not coming here with the intent to be Americans, but to be their own, to be Somalian, like as just as an example, Somalians in America. They're not trying to be Americans. They're trying to be Somalis in America. That key difference of wording is why there's been pushback, and why that and why we're facing such a culture problem today. For this to relate to systemic racism, if systemic racism were to still exist, these enclaves in Dearborn, Michigan, in Miami, in Minnesota as a whole, would not be allowed to coalesce, would not have gotten the national attention that it gets today, because systemic racism, as has been described in the past, since it only favored white people, these enclaves, these communities, would not have popped up because at some point they would have gotten too big to attract the eye of white culture as a whole, and would have been stamped out or lessened because they're not white. And they're not white, and they certainly are not going for the values set by America at its founding, and certainly not during the time that segregation was a thing. Now, one could say that due to segregation, these enclaves would only naturally pop up because of the fact that segregation would prevent these communities from integrating or talking with white schools or white communities. That would be true, but they certainly would not have had the same resources like they would. They would not have access to those same resources. And who knows? They certainly would not, and more to the point, they certainly would not have gotten the national attention that they get right now. They would have had their own sort of group media source, media like, because you know they would establish their own channels and whatnot that would talk to only Somalis, only fellow Somalis, or only fellow Muslims. But they would not get the national attention. They would not get catch the attention of things like ABC, which would have been white led. They would not gotten the attention of the president or as a House of Representative, because they're not white. They would not, and they certainly wouldn't have been able to go to the colleges that they would have access to, such as like your Yales or your Howards and stuff like that, your Rutgers and whatnot, your Michigans or Michigan States, because those were white schools. So the fact that these communities are allowed to prop up like they are, and to establish themselves as communities in the United States while not actually being American in mindset, further further enforces the fact that there's not systemic racism doesn't really exist. Doesn't really exist, because it's like, anyway.
Settlements, apologies, and land returns have yielded and persisted socioeconomic stagnation with high poverty rates, health disparities, and limited advancement despite symbolic gestures, proving that the financial redress alone fails to foster true progress or integration. I have all the evidence and data on this on countryhealthratings.org. Also, today I argue for reclamation and assimilation as the cornerstone of our republic, lest we surrender our culture to fragmentation and further cultural extermination. I can see my time.
All right. Thank you for that opening statement. I didn't want to interrupt your opening because we could hear you still, what you were saying, but you might check on the StreamYard and switch to make sure you have the right mic selected, because I think you were maybe on a distant mic there. It sounded like it wasn't the one in front of you.
Here we go. Can you hear me now?
That's perfect. Yep, that's better. But we still heard everything. That's the only reason I didn't interrupt you. So, but, you know what I mean?
Okay. You know what? Since I do have a little bit of time on my clock, let me go ahead and kind of repeat what I just said, because I know you heard me.
Well,
so real quick,
we did hear you. We did hear you, Marte. We did hear you. I promise.
Loud and clear.
Yeah.
No counterpoints. You were yawning.
I didn't want to interrupt you.
You heard what I was saying.
I would have interrupted you though if we couldn't.
You know what? I can see my time. Go ahead.
I promise. But with that, we're gonna hand the mic over here to counterpoints
with Marte's opening statement out of the way, which is a very strong opening statement on the fact that, to sum it up, white people are the most oppressed because we're telling society that white people are the bad guys, and we tell white people to their face that they are the bad guys, and that they should sit and take the punishment that they deserve for all of the atrocities and oppression that they have exhibited onto minorities since the United States' inception, since the settlement of America back in the 1600s. For all of that history of conquest and settling and making sure that and building up this country from the ground up, after moving away from England, fighting off the Brits, then fighting off the Brits again, and establishing ourselves as a nation worth talking about. That's super simple, but a nation worth talking about on the global stage, even back then. But because of things like the slave trade and the Western Railroad and the Mexican War of 1899 and whatnot, and the annexation of Texas and taking California from the Mexicans and whatnot, because all these other, especially the slave trade, because of all these things and the fact that white people did not fix it in a way that was suitable, that was not suitable, but accepted by people who continue to espouse civil rights today, because they didn't, quote unquote, do enough. What's happening today and the anti want to hang on to sorry, train of thought. Because they didn't do enough, This is now the punishment that they deserve. They deserve to have their own culture ripped out from under them. They deserve the comeuppance that has been 100 years in the making because of all of the oppression. A cycle of revenge, as it were, because they did not do enough to pay back. This is payback. And that's just stupid and wrong. And it also flies in the face of, well, there can't be systemic racism because the payback was the 20 acres and a mule. That was the reparations. We're sorry for putting you under a system that treated you like property. And this is how we say sorry, by giving you the means to build your own communities and to build your own futures. 20 acres and a mule. Because that's how the settlers did it when they first got here. On the Mayflower, the 2 other ships in that fleet. Just a few people, and from those few people, created an entire nation that went to the moon. An entire nation that, through social reform, through technological advancements, became the premier superpower on Earth. And all they did was bring themselves up with sticks and stones, basically. And yet here we have, and the whole systemic racism thing, here we have basically an entire culture that is telling an entire race that built up America to what it is today that they're the bad guys. Because at the time, it was financially viable to utilize the resources that were given to them at the time. That they later found out and agreed that it was wrong, to the detriment of, funny enough, Democrats. Anyway,
the opening statement, and whenever you're ready,
let us see what Mr. Counterpoints Connor has to say in response to all of this for his opening statement.
For that, I'll start the timer up with your voice. And again, thank you both for being here.
Yeah, so this was such a wild title.
Oh boy. He is starting off by saying that it is wild that white people can't say what they want to say and have to rely on people like me to say it for them. Which sucks, by the way. Sucks.
That I didn't do much preparation, but basically, I think that if we actually wanted to look at...
This is about the extent of my preparation myself, is just looking at things like this and understanding the kind of... understanding the topic that I'm going into. This is a related topic, which is why I'm going through it.
Who's the most oppressed? We can look at the definition of keep someone in subservience and hardship, especially by the unjust exercise of...
Now, this is something I need to watch out for when it comes to my own debate, is falling into traps where we start to gish gallop on semantics and definitions. They are important, and they are things that I will need to establish for myself. But a lot of definitions tend to be non sequiturs. As I've grown to learn about debates like this and conversations in this space, in this sphere, versus people like this, is that semantics are the weeds. Semantics get lost in the weeds, yet semantics are some of the most important things to make sure that everybody is on the same page when they talk about a topic.
Authority. So we could talk about law enforcement, we could talk about redlining, we could talk about generational wealth, we could talk about access to mortgages, we could talk about the GI Bill, we could talk about segregation in the military, we could talk about all the things that generationally have impacted the African-American community or the Hispanic community or the Asian communities over the past several decades. But I'm assuming, just jumping ahead a little bit, that you're going to say, oh, well, that's all in the past. Well, I will make...
It is all in the past. Just saying, it is all in the past, because we're dealing with today. The prompt says 2025. My prompt says the word does. Not did, not past tense, does. So, yes, it's in the past. We talk about it as though it's in the present, but only to reference the fact that it's in the past. What are we dealing with today? What are we dealing with today? That's the question. What are we dealing with today? And the answer to that is we're not dealing with it today. We're dealing with a whole bunch of people that are exaggerating problems that aren't there, or that are explained through other means that are more substantial, such as the economy, such as immigration, such as people not assimilating, such as people not being able to afford things, such as things like things that actually matter, that don't rely on the color of people's skins. Whether or not you're here correctly, whether or not you can afford a house, whether or not you are able to whether or not you're able to advance yourself in a career, or to eat at a restaurant. We don't deal with all of that. We made it such that talking about race is simply a I feel bad kind of issue. It's nothing institutionalized because we got rid of all of that. You can eat anywhere you want. You can go out to the sticks and buy a hamburger if it happens to be there. You'll get the normal, you may not look like the people in the area, but that happens everywhere, all over the globe. If you don't look like the local populace, you're going to get strange eyes looking at you. If you don't act like the local teen, you're going to get called out. You're going to be looked at differently. This is normal. But that has no bearing on the fact that it's systemic. Because at this point, the system is everyone can join. Everyone can do it. Everyone has the opportunity to advance themselves however they wish, however they see fit. Just being in a homogeneous society is not systemic racism. That's what all of these leftists get wrong when they talk about these things. It's not racist to like to see your own people. It's not racist to hold people to a standard of being an American citizen. And if you're not, it's not racist to want people to follow the law. So, just because you might get strange looks doesn't mean that you can't be there. Doesn't mean that you're not allowed to be there. You're allowed to be there. You just may get a strange look or two. So yes, it's in the past, because in essence it was solved. So to bring it up, you're being disingenuous, you're being obtuse, and for what? You're still allowed to you're still allowed in there. You're still allowed to partake in it. The very fact that you go into these institutions or these places and still get served, regardless of the color of your skin, means that it's not systemic anymore. Means that it's not even racism. If you act a fool, it's not racist to say that you're acting a fool. Get out of my restaurant. It doesn't matter whether you're black, white, Asian, purple, green, whatever. You're acting a fool, and that's not racist.
Basically arguments that systems take time to modify and for people to overcome their systems.
Which is why the true integration and the true solving of systemic racism did not fully coalesce and show itself, so to speak, until the late 80s, 90s, and 2000s, where at that point, people didn't talk about race unless you were part of a group that was talking about race. Unless you were part of a group. It was systemic, it wasn't universal. You just didn't talk about it because everyone's an American at the end of the day. And if everyone's American, it doesn't matter what you look like, you're an American. The only people that were truly harping up on racial issues were the sporadic groups like the NAACP or BLM or, you know, Tea Party or white supremacists that, or, you know, the Mexican or Hispanic gangs that would come up and say, you know, only Hispanics, only blacks, and treating you know, Rodney King and all of that stuff. And they had an axe to grind. These are usually groups that had axes to grind at that point, with the fact that there wasn't enough done. What enough was? They couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you. But they didn't do enough, therefore it still exists. Even though the impact has been lessened to such a degree that it is basically a non sequitur in the grand scheme of society and culture itself.
Also, I'm not a leftist. I'm not like a DEI, CRT, progressive, woke person. But I do think that reality is reality. So I think that the United States of America is a liberal, capital L liberal project based off of a constitution. It's a republic, meaning that's a representative democracy, and that we have the capacity to integrate.
And how much representation do we have in terms of, you know, non-whites in the United States Senate, in the U.S. Supreme Court, in the House of Representatives? You know, how much representation? Well, actually, first, is there representation? Because that's the true form of whether systemic racism exists. Is there representation or not? If there's not any representation, and it's coded and it can be clearly shown that there isn't and there hasn't been, but there were attempts to that just didn't work out, and it was because of racism, then that can be shown. But because there isn't, where is it? It's just not it. Anyway,
many of the people that you are hostile to. When we take a look at your opening video and we take a look at the things that you're talking about, I'll just run it down kind of in response to your opener. Okay, so a Muslim mayor saying that somebody is bigoted and shitty and he's happy when he'll move out of the neighborhood. What the fuck does that prove? I have no idea how that proves that white people are the most oppressed people in the world. We want ICE out of our city so we can focus on ICE violence prevention policies that we know work, and we're going to create ICE-free zones. Okay, some woke dickhead in, you know, a blue state is preventing mass deportation.
Woke dickhead.
We can talk about the cruelties of deportation, ICE violence prevention policies that we know work, and we're going to create ICE-free zones.
I'm like Marte here. And what the fuck are you talking about? You're creating ICE-free zones to keep ICE from doing its job in enforcing immigration policies. What the hell do you mean violence?
Okay, some woke dickhead in, you know, a blue state is preventing mass deportation. We can talk.
Yes, and that's bad, because when you're not getting rid of people who shouldn't be here, you are perpetuating breaking the law because of it.
About the cruelties of deportation. Matter of fact, if you want to skip past the systemic argument, we could just talk about the way that law enforcement is conducted in this country. We could also talk about the way that the mass deportations have been conducted in this country, effectively
I would love to hear that.
Violating the Fourth Amendment of the United States. As a constitutionalist, as a Republican, somebody who believes in a republic, violating the Constitution pisses me off.
So why are you against deportation for illegal immigrants, when the whole point of due process is to process immigrants to make sure that they are here, that they are supposed to be here? That's part of our amendment. That's the whole point of the Fifth. Wait, no. That's not the Fifth. Everyone has right to due process. I forget which amendment that was. Due process amendment. Which amendment was this? Oh, the 5th and 14th Amendment. Oh, it is the 5th Amendment. Life, liberty, or property. Yeah. everybody's is expected due process, and the due process is due process. They're not gonna go over this. Not gonna tell you like what due process is because they can't define it. They say court of law, but really due process is simply due process can be boiled down to. Tim Pool said it best. I don't remember his exact wording, but it was along the line. I'm going to paraphrase. It was along the lines of due process is simply the amount of is simply the necessary amount it's not a court of law. It's not you get judged in a court of law. It is the necessary demonstration. I guess I'll say it in my own words. The necessary demonstration for how would I best describe it? Necessary demonstration of equal. I'm trying not to use the word processing, but of equal, of not equal, but equivalent scrutiny under the law. Of equivalent scrutiny under the law. That is a bad interpretation. I understand, but if we were to look up what due process means, due process meaning. This is a good way to. This is a good way to This is a good way to look at it. The first thing, number one is an established course for judicial proceedings or other governmental activities designed to safeguard the legal rights of the individual. The legal concept where a person is ensured all legal rights when deprived of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for a given reason. But number one is the best way to describe due process. It's, basically, whatever governmental activities are designed to basically give the most fair judgment on an individual. So like not fair, yeah, fair judgment of the individual. So for immigrants in this case, it's simply where are your papers? That itself is due process, because for any citizen of the United States, especially if they're an immigrant, if he or she is an immigrant, you will look at you would want to know that you are here legally. And one of the easiest ways to determine whether you're here legally is showing your ID, is showing your papers. What are your papers? I can go into my wallet right now and get out my driver's license, and it's a true and real driver's license, and be able to show that at any time that someone asks me, someone of authority such as a police officer or an ICE officer would ask me, where are your papers? But they have no reason to ask that of me because I'm already legitimate. The only times that this does not apply, that this would not apply, or this would turn into an issue, is when people begin to fight back. And that's the whole, and unfortunately, that's where all of the problems lie. Anyway. Back to the debate.
White people are racist. This is like a black lady from 10 years ago. I've been seeing this fat lady with a fucking fupa with her dumbass fucking PayPal for a decade. So the fact that you're bringing it up like this is a common sentiment in the black community is some random fat sociological degree having weirdo freak asking for a bunch of like white Karens to donate to her PayPal. The fact that you're acting like that is the average black person through your intro, I think is fucking crazy. Now, when it comes to white culture, once again,
it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be the representative of, what did you say?
It up like this is a common sentiment in the black community is some random fat sociological degree
What's funny is that it is a common sentiment. It's just not. It's a sentiment. That's what it is. Counterpoints doesn't understand is that it's a sentiment. It's not something that they have to say, that a group of people have to say explicitly, although they do. But it's this common sentiment. It's something that they think subtly in their everyday lives. They may not specifically think about it, but because of all of the indoctrination, the narrative pushing, the propaganda, it's ingrained. The psychological aspect has already been established. So it may not be an explicit common sentiment, and who knows, a lot of those would be like, oh wait, I wouldn't really say that about white people. I wouldn't say that about white people. However, there would be a part of them, there would be a part of people of color that would, to a certain degree, agree with that sentiment, and they would have that sentiment in some form. And it's that little bit of agreement that perpetuates people like that really big woman in that class.
Having weirdo freak asking for a bunch of like
weird. It's that agreement. It's that normal agreement to the sentiment, that normal sentiment that normal people have, the everyday people that are trying to live their daily lives, that agree to that sort of thing, that allows the weirdo freaks the power that they have.
White Karens to donate to her PayPal. The fact that you're acting like that is the average black person through your intro, I think is fucking crazy.
It's not the average black person. That's an extreme. But it's closer to the average than you may think.
Now, when it comes to white culture, once again, I'm not a leftist. I think there is white culture. The same way that black people were brought over from various parts of Africa, thrown into a melting pot of the United States of America.
By other Africans, by the way.
And had to create a new culture that involved new language, new religion, new customs, and new traditions. I think Northern Europeans and Mediterranean Europeans immigrated to the United States, and they had to give up their Italian heritage. They had to give up their Irish heritage.
Because they're in America now. And they can't bring, and they were heavily encouraged to be Americans. Because otherwise they would be Irish in a place that wasn't Irish. That was the dominant culture. If you're going to be in America, you be American. When in Rome, do as Romans do.
They had to give up these things, and they created white culture. I agree that American culture as a umbrella over the black culture, over the white culture, over the Hispanic culture has been a force for good. And many of the things that you valorize about the United States of America, I probably valorize as well. When you say end multiculturalism, we would have to be specific about it. I don't think Mexicans need to stop making tacos. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite things is a authentic Mexican restaurant. I just went on a date with my wife to recently. That was phenomenal. I don't want people to give up their food. I don't want people to give up their religion either.
Nobody's saying to give up your food. God damn it, man. I have not truly contended with these ideas as of yet myself, but I hear it all the time, where the argument is that if you're going to get rid of one thing, well, you're just going to have to get rid of the whole thing. And it's like, no. By your own logical admission, people are more complicated than that. Cultures are more complicated than that. There's nuance to cultures. We're not saying get rid of your tacos. We're saying get rid of illegals. Mexican people who are here legally can still make their fucking tacos. But they're here legally to do it. We're saying get rid of the illegal Mexicans that are not supposed to be here. Get rid of the illegal Asians that are not supposed to be here. People who would be of the culture, of that little subculture or sub-heritage. But the primary difference is that there's a group of them that are here legally. And another group that are here illegally. These people, the illegals, need to go. But these people who are legal, who are trying to actually make it in America by being American, but want to keep a certain part of their heritage intact, which is fine, by the way, and which is where all of this cultural, shifting has jumped off the deep end for, is that we didn't just keep it to simply just, oh, here's a little bit of my heritage, but I'm an American at heart. No. This is my heritage, this is my culture, but you're in America. Well, who cares about them? Who cares about America? This is my culture. And not being an American first. It's there being a Mexican first over being an American. And that's what's wrong.
Central and South Americans are typically Catholic. They don't need to convert to Protestantism in order to be more similar.
And you know what? The system allows it. We allow it. Civil Rights Act says, you can't discriminate based on race. You can't discriminate based on national origin. It allows it. It allows for this fostering of culture, of this of heritage, and being not America first, frankly. You're allowed to establish your own culture within America, and you can't be judged for it, essentially. I mean, wrong. You can be judged for it, but you can't be treated any differently than any other American that would want to celebrate their own heritage, with their own communities. They're allowed to do it. So the fact that there would be any sort of systemic racism because of it is a non sequitur and shouldn't even be considered.
Related with the Northern European white culture, which is predominantly Protestant, that's a very silly thing to think is necessary in order for the American project to proceed. Whites have had the greatest empires in history. That's true. But empires come with violence and crime and authoritarianism and rape and murder and sacking of cities and all this bullshit. And we should be
normal amongst human history and human tribes. Completely normal. All throughout history, everyone has done it. There is not a single group in history that did not take and conquer over others. It is not racial.
It's about our history. So if we look at the colonialism of the Spanish in the Americas, we should say, yeah, maybe Christianity is great. Maybe the new American world is great. Maybe the world as it is right now is amazing.
Where were they before Christianity entered the scene? Did they have guns? Did they have technology? Before whites and Christians came onto the scene, or Spaniards in this case, but came onto the scene, what did they have? In terms of any sort of human advancement, the likes of which it would only be rivaled by whites. What did they have? Did they have the same technology, the same resources? They had access to them. They had access. Where was it? What were they before all of that happened?
For all of its technology, but also there was some fucked up shit that happened during the colonial period. If we look at the transatlantic slave trade, we don't have to excuse all the fucked up barbaric violence that was necessary in order to make the transatlantic slave trade. We can just go, yeah, that's fucked up, but it was a few hundred years ago. We're trying to get over it now.
I think we sufficiently got over it at this point. I mean, again, the question is what's left? What's left to address?
You also brought up that women are just cattle in rival societies. Okay, what does women being oppressed in the Middle East and North Africa have to do with whether or not white people are the most oppressed in the United States of America? You're saying that
because we're telling white people that they should act more like those same those same Pakistanis in the Middle East. Or we're allowing Middle Easterners to impose their cultures and customs onto white people, and when white people speak up, saying that that's bad, saying that they should not do that.
Oh, well, we're importing all these shitty third world cultures and then they're not integrated. I'm an integrationist. I want people to integrate. I want them to, number one, care about the Constitutional Republic of the United States before they even get here. Number two, I want them to be forced to learn English. That way they can integrate into our society. Number three, I don't think that we should bring over so many people so quickly that we create the ethno-religious enclaves that you're talking about. Your hostility, I hate jihadist terrorism, just like anybody else. I hate jihadist terrorism. I think liberals and progressives and lefties are blind to jihadist terrorism, but I also think your hostility to Muslims is probably overblown. 99% of Muslims are chill, decent people who believe in God, the last day, doing good works, and that Muhammad is God's messenger. Muhammad's kind of a jerk, peace be upon him, but, you know, at the same time, they're not necessarily trying to decapitate you. You brought up that a liberal colorblind society is what we were indoctrinated to in the 90s and thousands. I wish we could get to that. I wish we could get to the American primary identity. We don't care if you're white or black, you're American.
I would need to hear that again.
Colorblind society is trying to decapitate you. You brought up that a liberal colorblind society is what we were indoctrinated to in the 90s and thousands.
Am I did my own personal upbringing just not happen? Isn't that the whole point of stopping racism? Isn't that the whole point of the Civil Rights Act of 1964? To get to this point of colorblindness? Did I miss something through the first 18 years of my life where we were constantly told not to view other kids by the color of their skin, or the fact that it was never even mentioned throughout the entirety of growing up? Did that just not happen? Like, what are we talking about? What are we talking about here? Seriously.
I wish we could get to that.
We did. I don't know where Connor has grew up, but I could tell you from my own personal experience that I have two ethnically diverse groups of friends. Yeah, this is the I have a black friend argument, but I can rest assured, especially in California, and most blue states, we grew up with the fact that these permanently integrated schools saw friend groups full of different people of all shapes, sizes, and colors. So, and we all viewed each other as friends and people. That's the color blindness. So I don't know where Connor lives such that he does not see it within his own culture. Has he not been to a school? He's not been to a school to see just how integrated all of these people are. Not having seen color blindness, he hasn't been to a school. You haven't been in any blue city in this country. It's everywhere. No, we are in a post-racial and a colorblind society. The only times that it's ever brought up is for the occasional case that gets boosted in the media, selectively, by the way, where it's only typically it's sensationalized instances where where usually a person of color, a colored person, as I could say, gets boosted in the media, and then the narrative surrounding that event isn't the event itself and the surrounding facts of the event. It's the fact that the person was colored. It's the fact that the person was black or Hispanic or brown in this case. But not just the fact that, oh, he committed a crime. The fact that a lot of these atrocities happen in America today, Irina Zarutska, where DeCarlos Brown Jr., whatever that monster's name is, was previously let out of jail after having committed multiple crimes. Should tell you everything you need to know in the fact that we live in a quote post-racial society. But the only, no, actually not, yeah, post-racial society, and the fact that the people that keep bringing it up, people that keep bringing up racism, want to contend with the fact that, don't want to contend with the fact that this is a multi-criminal monster having been let out 14 times prior. That's not the important thing. The important thing is that he's black. And who says this? The left. Anyway.
I wish we could get to the American primary identity. We don't care if you're white or black, you're American first. I would love to get to that. But there's a whole history of grievance that we're going to have to address regardless.
And that's the problem. A whole history. Even though it's all in the past, and the people of today did not experience what the people of yesteryear experienced, suddenly the sins of the father argument is what comes up. Sins of the father. Because your ancestors did it back then, you yourself need to pay it now. Even though you had no hand in what happened when your ancestors did it, you yourself have to pay because we can't actually get to your ancestors. This shit needs to stop, man.
So whether or not you like it. I think that's almost it, because the truth is that, like, we're going to get into Sharia law, we're going to get into Cuban ethno-religious enclaves, but I can leave that for the open. Oh, sorry, final point. If we look by any metric of academic achievement, lifespan, health outcomes, education, IQ, incarceration rates, any of that shit, it's going to be pretty clear that Jews and Asians are going to be at the top, whites are going to be a close second, Hispanics are going to be slightly behind.
Which also shows that systemic racism doesn't exist, because if that were the case, if systemic racism were still prominent today, Jews and Asians would not be at the top of academic success or economic success. Jews and Asians would not be beating out the majority race of America in terms of economic prosperity. There would just be no way that whites, who supposedly would be running the country, would ever allow that to happen. Market-wise, legislation-wise, what have you. Especially Asians, who are an even smaller minority than even blacks and Hispanics, Latinos and whatnot. They are a smaller population, and yet they are some of the richest people in America.
Whites, and then blacks are going to be at the far bottom. So once again, if we look at any stat of like quality of life in America, whites are like second or third best within our own society. So saying that we're oppressed, I think is an absurd statement. And
so systemic racism doesn't exist, because if it were, then whites would not be third, they'd be first. Because racism, at least in the USA, should be prioritizing white people. It should be prioritizing white people over every other race in America.
with that, I'll yield the remainder of my time.
All right. Thank you for that opening statement, Counterpoints. And with that, we are going to get in over to the 5-minute uninterrupted rebuttal. We're going to hand the mic back to Marte. So, Marte, whenever you're ready, I'll start the timer up with your voice.
It's funny because this is all...
It's funny you say a couple things, but yet you don't address a lot that's in my opening statement. Case in point, you said that women are treated like cattle, nor did I even mount that or utter that. That never left my mouth. What I said is how they're treated. I didn't say like cattle. Second of all, you said, I like, integration. And you said, that's what I want them to do. I want them to do this. That's not what's happening right now. They are not integrating in our society. Secondly, you say, what does this have to do in Dearborn, Michigan, when the mayor Muhammad, whatever his name is saying that I need a white Christian to be escorted out of the city with a parade. Right now, this is being a semblance of what is to come. come. If we see this, we can look at Europe as an example of what's happening. So when you talk about a hatred towards Muslim ideals and things like this, a further provocation of people integrating into society in mass, unchecked, with no checks and balances, well, insert the UK, look what's happening right there. So we also see that too. We can talk about law enforcement too as well too. Being the fact that I could bring up FBI stats, the latest that I could show you too, and also put this in the chat so we can bring up on the screen, that race, as far as racist, blacks kill blacks, more than whites kill blacks, and whites kill whites more than anybody. Interracial violence is really high. But if you really look at these stats, whites are killed more by blacks, even though blacks make up a minority of most of the populations that we see. So that is also happening too. So when you say, what does any of this shit have to do with what I'm talking about? We're talking about culture. We're talking about the Hollywood race swapping. We're talking about everything else. Matter of fact, this is covert racism. This is what the plantation owners have done to the slaves. What they're doing in Hollywood right now, they're giving scraps and leftovers. Notice how it's only the black characters who are given scraps and leftovers, and the main white characters are saying, here you go. Oh no, you poor thing. Black people, do you want a chance to play the main character? You can pretend to be white for a while. To me, that's what's happening right now. And also, this is also debasing white culture as well too. Anytime I can go out and be racist towards white people, and that's okay. Mexicans, Hispanics, and everybody else can do this. That's also cultural oppression. Whites, they can't do this. I can open up a black-owned barbershop. Let's see you try to open up a white-owned barbershop and see if that white-owned on there. See if that flies. This doesn't happen. Matter of fact, we can even look at other institutions, the NAACP. Think about it like this, if you will, counterpoints. The National Advancement of White People. God, this is crazy. I can go to lengths at how much whites can't talk about this. You've never addressed the white silence that I brought up in my opening statement. That's the reason why I'm here talking, because if you switch places with me, you would be called a racist. Matter of fact, I can say I have pride in my race and all this other shit. And you can vote, and you can call back to history and say, well, because of the plan, all this other slavery stuff, we're in 2025. That's what the prompt says. Let's stick to the generation that we're in right now. According to this generation, you can't have any pride in your race. You can't even talk about white history because that's being washed down and revised in history, in colleges, in institutions. Matter of fact, I can point to the demographic that's debasing your culture as we talk about this. There are white liberal women. Yes, that's very distinct. And I'm honing in on a special subset of people. I know you're not a liberal. Nobody cares about that right now. You could be a Republican, a staunch Republican, in advocating for your position right now. What I'm talking about is society, not you. We're talking about a societal norm that's happening right now. If I say, we'll even say salt and crackers. If I call you that right now, that's perfectly fine. But if you do the inverse of that, oh, channel banned, all bad, this is bad. Matter of fact, white oppression.
We're reaching a point in society where we can actually, counterpoints can actually start to say that, and he'll start to get less backlash. Start to. Less. Not no backlash. Not no backlash, but he'll start to get less. But Marte is primarily right because, well, he because it's not there yet. It's not wholesale. It hasn't reached to points where counterpoints can be mean to Marte and not get backlash for it. But we're not there yet.
Happens in the black communities. If I speak with good grammatical precision and enunciate my words and speak grammatically correct, I'm now talking white, and now I'm being talked down on, oh, that has to be weeded out of black culture because now I want to be white. That's being degraded as well in black culture. So this pervasive ideology of white oppression doesn't just happen institutionally. This is happening culturally in media, in movies, as Thor, matter of fact, Heimdall, he was white in the comics. If we're talking about this, Ariel, the little mermaid, is now being swiped out for being white. Blacks are now being handed leftover characters. Matter of fact, there's a solution I can give. Why not give original characters to everybody else? But guess what this is doing? This is undermining white culture. Now with critical race theory, that wasn't the video from back in the day. This is currently happening right now in mass, and it's being produced as well too. You haven't addressed the DEI issues as well too. Matter of fact, I've yet to hear a solid argument against anything I've ever uttered. Let me just concede my time because I'm really wanting to get into these arguments.
Correct. I mean, it was fast, and I kind of just let it go, but and I likely might do this with my opponent tomorrow as well. Kind of just let them talk, but it makes. Let me go back and.
Do the inverse of that. Oh, channel banned, all bad. This is bad. Matter of fact, white oppression happens in the black communities. If I speak with good grammatical precision.
Yeah.
and enunciate my words and speak grammatically correct, I'm now talking white, and now I'm being talked down on, oh, that has to be weeded out of black culture because now I want to be white. That's being degraded as well in black culture. So this pervasive ideology of white oppression doesn't just happen institutionally. This is happening culturally in media, in movies, as Thor, matter of fact, Heimdall, he was white in the comics. If we're talking about this, Ariel, the little mermaid, is now being swiped out for being white. Blacks are now being handed leftover characters. Matter of fact, there's a solution I can give. Why not give original characters to everybody else? But guess what?
But you know the big problem with that is that if they are given original characters, if original characters are given to black people or given to other races, they now have to hold up on their own. They have to stand on their own merits as characters and be judged as characters. And the creators of today, you know, we had Expedition 33 exist, but that was a white game with an Asian, by the way, with an Asian. So there's your representation. But for black characters need to stand on their own. And because as of right now, they can't, they don't. And so they need to be given scraps so that they can take advantage of being of an establishment that was already there. And that's the leeching. That's the cultural leeching that I have a problem with. And most black people should also have a problem with, because it's the exact same thing as it was all the way back then. We typically got the scraps when the white people were done with whatever the current thing was and have moved on to the new current thing, and they got the new thing first. And so they handed, and so then they would give everyone else the hand-me-downs. That's what this is. When you race swap, you're essentially giving black people hand-me-downs. You're giving other minority groups hand-me-downs. And I don't see how that's not insulting in and of itself. To be given hand-me-downs rather than original, great, fantastic characters. Why wouldn't you strive to create your own character that stands on the same stage as Batman, as Ariel, as Heimdall, as Nick Fury, as Superman and whatnot? We don't need a black Superman if we had this is racist. If we had Black Man standing on the same toes on the same stage as Superman or some degree, but he was just as great. The only thing is he was just black. A completely new character that can stand on his own 2 feet and doesn't need an established franchise or an established fan base in order to leech off of. Because what happens with these leeched characters, these leeched fan bases, is that they take the established relationship between the character and the audience of that character, and immediately what needs to happen is that A, the comparisons are immediate, and B, the character as it is needs to stand on its feet. Needs to stand on its own 2 feet. However, it is at a disadvantage. The character is at a disadvantage because people's first impression of the character as it was named was this other form. And so it's at a disadvantage because it needs to compare and surpass. That's the key word. Surpass what came before. And oftentimes it doesn't. One of the only instances where the character was race swapped and it suited and it surpassed the previous iteration in my own was Nick Fury in the Marvel comics. The Nick Fury that we see in the movies today is the ultimate Nick Fury that was turned black. It was a different universe Nick Fury because the original Nick Fury, the one in the Earth 616 timeline, typically was white. But the ultimate Nick Fury, which is a separate multiverse timeline, a separate universe within the Marvel series, was black and modeled after Samuel L. Jackson. Hence why he's black in the Marvel movies. But that's one of the only times when a race swapped character, and even then it's technically not race swapped because it's a different universe, surpassed the original. But oftentimes, and what happens almost all the time at this point, is the fact that the race swap functions like a sequel. It's compared to the original, and oftentimes the original is still just better. You can't beat the classics, kind of thing.
This is doing this undermining white culture. Now with critical race theory, that wasn't the video from back in the day. This is currently happening right now in mass, and it's being produced as well too. You haven't addressed the DEI issues as well too. Matter of fact, I've yet to hear a solid argument against anything I've ever uttered. Let me just concede my time because I'm really wanting to get into these arguments.
All right. Thank you for that rebuttal, Marte. And with that, we're going to hand the mic back over to Counterpoints for your uninterrupted 5-minute rebuttal. And whenever you're ready, I'll start the timer up with your voice.
Yeah, so I think the reason why you probably haven't heard a specific rebuttal to your arguments is because you've given me plenty of them simultaneously. So when we move into the open, I would actually love it if we like picked one, stuck with it for 10 or 15 minutes, picked another one, stuck with it for 10 or 15 minutes, just so we don't have to jump back and forth between different topics. But just to respond to what you've said so far in your response, integration is not what's happening right now. I live in Florida. What
do you mean integration is not what's happening right now? What's the point of desegregation if that's not what that means?
Probably the future of what America looks like, where we're going to have a white plurality, a Northern European plurality, a Hispanic plurality. We're probably going to keep Black folk around 10%. We're probably going to keep Asians around 5%, including Muslims. And integration happens all the time, especially in Central Florida. We have every race, creed, and color running around at the parks, and everybody seems to get along relatively well. Not just that, but...
So again, how does that equate to systemic racism being prevalent? Well, admittedly, a whole bunch of people living together is not indication that systemic racism exists. So it doesn't exist. It's just a whole bunch of people living together. That's not the racist part. That's not what would count as racism.
Effectively, like when it comes to Hispanic folk in particular, in law enforcement, just as an example, probably 2/3 of my law enforcement class had Hispanic last names. Only 2 of them spoke Spanish. So they're
exclusively?
They're all a bunch of like anglicized pop culture, Justin Bieber, Taylor Swift listening, effectively whiteified Hispanic people who are joining law enforcement, and they don't even speak their mother tongue. So integration is absolutely happening all the time. In reference to the UK, look at what...
Okay, fine. So where's the racism portion? Because they've been given the opportunity to go into law enforcement and to make a difference by representing their heritage, their culture. Congrats to them.
What's happening there? Listen, once again, I hate jihadist terrorism as much as the next person. I think that most liberals and progressives are blind to it. But the UK is not this like anarchic shithole where Pakistanis and Palestinians are running around just raping and murdering everybody.
That's not what the data says. And it only gets worse as time goes on.
They have a 90% less homicide rate than us. They have the like rape gangs, the grooming gangs are getting broken up.
They're not. In fact, they're being protected institutionally by the police.
Talk about the issues with there, but I'm probably going to agree with 90% of your criticisms that the UK police were too sensitive to cultures that were coming in. And as a result, they ignored effectively girls who were in the foster system being...
They ignored their own populace in favor of not being in favor of not being racist. They chose optics over the protection of their actual citizens.
groomed and raped by racist Pakistani gangs that were racist against white people. We're probably just going to agree. And I think that those people should be incarcerated. And I think anybody who isn't sympathetic to them should be incarcerated. And I think that anybody who's a peaceful, law-abiding citizen from that community should be integrated intentionally through language and legal classes and public education, et cetera, et cetera. You're right that I probably couldn't own a white-owned barbershop and make that part of the marketing strategy now. Maybe in a century when whites are a plurality, you could absolutely do that because it's just going to be a statement about cultural affinity. So I don't take these things as like, you're talking about white silence. I would say that probably most white people, if you are chill as an ethno-religious minority, an immigrant to the country, if you want to contribute to the economy, if you want to contribute to society, if you're good to your kids, if you pay your taxes, you work your job, most white people don't give a shit. This is why this is relegated to online schizophrenic, dissident right-wing circles. This is why you guys are trying to infect the mainstream narrative and trying to make it more racialized and tribalized. You said that you don't want to be a Black American, you don't want to be a mixed race American, you just want to be an American. I'm probably a partner in that project. But what I don't like is I don't like the unnecessary hostility towards other people. I don't like the fact that in order to achieve your goals, we have to sweep the crimes of white history. I don't like that we have to...
Nobody's sweeping the crimes of white history. We're saying stop focusing on the fact that whites did things in the past that other ethnicities and other races have also done in their own ways in the past as well. And stop focusing on it because that's not what's happening today. It's all right talking about history, but only in the essence of either explaining what's happening today or simply to talk about how history has happened. But when you're dealing with present conflicts, you deal with present conflicts. History, all history is simply an explanation for why things are the way that they are. And that is, it should not ever be used as a justification for action taken today. And I'm talking more so like far history. I'm talking more so like history beyond what has immediately happened or has happened recently. It's an explanation, not a justification.
Freak out about pop culture bullshit because, to be honest, yeah, Heimdall's Black. He was played by Idris Elba. Idris Elba is a phenomenal actor.
That's not the point. It doesn't matter that Idris Elba is a phenomenal actor. The point is that they changed the race unnecessarily. You know who else is a really good actor but is also white? Heimdall could have been played by any number of white actors that were available at the time. Let's see. Who can I think of? Chris Pine, let's say. He could have been played by Chris Pine. Perfectly white actor. May not have been may not be the proper fit for the character of Heimdall, but it doesn't matter. It would have stayed true to the character as it was written in the comics. And Chris Pine is a phenomenal actor as well. So why couldn't they stick to canon and gotten someone who was white? Benedict Cumberbatch or something like that. That's the problem here. Is that, yeah, Idris Elba is a phenomenal actor, but so is Benedict Cumberbatch. And they could have gotten Benedict Cumberbatch to be Heimdall. Even though he's Doctor Strange now, but they could have gotten Chris Pine to play Heimdall, or whoever the Shazam dude is. He could have played Heimdall or something like that. Either way, it's someone who's white and someone who is like the character canonically in the comics. And there you have, it would have been more correct in that sense.
So is it a little weird that the pagan Aryan Norse mythology was co-opted and multiracialized? Yeah, it's a little weird.
That right there is the primary problem of why it has seeped into culture and seeped into society as much as it has. Because it doesn't need to. You stop it then. You stop it with this. Yeah, that kind of feels a little weird. You have to, because at that point, that's the gate. That's the pressure point. That's the inciting incident. It's a little weird. That's where it needs to stop. That right there. Oh, it feels a little weird that it was co-opted. Those words, that sentence, is why gatekeeping is necessary. Because the justification of, well, it's fiction, so it doesn't have to, so it doesn't matter, can be reversed and saying, well, it's fiction, so it doesn't matter that you need to change it. Why change it if it's just fiction? Just make a new character.
But did Idris Elba kick ass in the fucking role? Absolutely.
The ends don't justify the means. That's what that is.
I loved Idris Elba in that role. Same thing with what is it? Zendaya playing Mary Jane. Zendaya's hot. So yeah, like I want to see.
So is Sydney Sweeney. And yet Sydney Sweeney looks like the character canonically. Or at least is of similar stature to the character canonically. You're really telling me that they could not find a redhead, another white redhead, in acting, in the acting sphere? I wouldn't be surprised, because there's been a heavy extinction level event of getting rid of redheads in entertainment. And it's really sad.
Gingers every now and then. I want to see redheads get their representation too, but this isn't an existential crisis.
So why change? So why change it? You are taking representation away from redheads by changing it to Zendaya. It doesn't matter how she acted in the role. You are taking away representation.
This isn't indications. Idris Elba getting a Marvel movie role is not indications of my imminent dispossession of political power and genocide. And the project that we're working towards.
Diminishing of the point. Right there. Just because Idris Elba is good enough at the role, it doesn't matter that you're systematically, destroying the fact that, continuity means, it doesn't matter that continuity means nothing at this point. It doesn't matter, because Idris Elba is good. He's a great actor. It doesn't matter that you're systematically taking away representation from a race that you for some reason deem as majority, and they have so many at this point. Well, finite is not infinite. You take away so much and eventually they don't have representation. And you know what else? They have this thing where leftists have this thing where they want to go all throughout history, and they want to use history both in the affirmative and in the negative. In this case, the leftist perspective would say that because historically, white people have had so much representation, so much, that since their form of representation is all of history, all of it, all of entertainment history, that they are allowed to have this one. That at some point, if it means that in this near future, there are no white people represented in media, it doesn't matter that they don't have any representation today. It doesn't matter that they have representation today. They can just go to the past. They can just go through their history, their historic catalog, where they had all the representation. That's your representation right there. You want to talk about representation for white people? That's your representation. Take the last 150 years of entertainment and the fact that you were everywhere in media. You took all the roles. You took all the background roles. You took all the side roles, the primary, secondary, tertiary roles and characters in most of, if not all of, fiction. And that's your representation. You could just go back to the olden times. Go back to the old film. Oh, what? You're getting rid of old film as well because that's not culturally relevant either? Well, tough shit. You should have talked to the people at the time to be better people. Even though you can't travel back in time, there's no time travel, doesn't matter. You have the old times, but those old times are also being erased because they don't work today. It doesn't matter. You're white people. You have all of the representation you could ever have. Now it's our turn. So you just sit back and let the real races take center stage. You can afford not to have some representation every now and then, even though every now and then turns into all the time, turns into you'll never get representation again, and that's what you deserve. That's the next step that they never ever want to say. But this is all in terms how all of this ties back to systemic racism. And yeah, I'm making comments here and stuff like that, but how this all ties back to systemic racism, because systemic racism would not have allowed something like this to happen. They would not forget who they were. They would not forget that the majority, systemic racism would not allow for these kinds of, it would be an immune system. It would act like an immune system in that they would not allow for thoughts like this to fester in society. Because at some point, someone would look at that and be, why are they taking away white people? We're the majority of people in America here. This is our country. And sure, this kind of goes into the whole white supremacist mind thinking, but at the same time, you're encroaching on society that is majority white people. And it's not even true. Like this is the quote unquote fair treatment. The fact that they're able to do this means that this is the fair treatment. So you can't have systemic racism because white people just wouldn't allow this. They would say, "Oh, they're trying to take over us. We need to protect our own." And yeah, you can say that again. You can say that for today, but they're trying to take our own. We can't allow that. And then it would just be universally recognized and known that that people can't race swap like that. What's happening now is a result of systemic racism not having this discussion. Having this discussion right here is why systemic racism doesn't exist, because we're allowed to have these conversations now. It's allowed to happen that you can just race swap and nobody bats an eye. That's the thing. Nobody bats an eye when you do it. I mean, people do, but the argument comes from continuity, not the fact that they're black, not the fact that they're white. It's the reason is continuity. We want them to stay the same because it's canonical to the source material.
Should be more collaborative, that it should be hostile, especially when it comes to Hispanics, which are probably 95% of the people who come into this country.
Need to open the window.
All right. Thank you for that rebuttal. Great rebuttals from both sides. Before we move into the open hour of back and forth, let me just talk to the audience real quick. If you're watching right now, okay, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and subscribe to Culture Format. You're doing it quite the whole end, right? Timer up with your voice. And again,
sorry, Speak. I'm passing through, but yeah, go subscribe to the channel if you happen to be here and happen to see this in the VOD. Go subscribe to SpeakEazy's channel. He's a great debater, great debate hoster, and he's why I'm going to have a debate tomorrow, 12/22.
Yes, I'm ready to get into this right now. First of all, counterpoints, I want to thank you for actually contending with the argument, or at least attempting to. And then SpeakEazy, I didn't say this in the intro, I appreciate you hosting this debate and letting me up on the panel. Let's get into this right now. So once again, you mischaracterized something as well too. You did this twice already, but I don't want to point out the previous two times. Let's get into this time. When you talked about Hollywood and how this isn't an existential crisis or anything, remember what I said about us getting leftovers and kind of scraps and then being sold or unoriginal characters formerly portrayed by white people? To me, I'm just like, how is this not reverse racism? Not once addressed this. You just said, oh no, it's not happening. Thus proving my whole
reverse racism doesn't exist. It's just racism.
Point that even though it's happening, you bought into this and saying, oh, you know what? It's not happening. It's not a big thing, even though we have to eat scraps again, thus living on a cultural plantation still. Haven't even once reconciled this. I'm still waiting for reconciliation on that.
Yeah. Can we start with that and stick with that for a second?
Yeah. Let's stick to this topic.
Yeah, so let's stick with pop culture for a minute. So Blade, is Blade a tokenized character for Black America?
I can say that longevity has something to do with this. I think that if it happens a long time under the guise of being bought into something over a period of time, I can then be bought and sold an idea under the guise of saying, oh, maybe people were born into this generation where they were, they didn't realize Blade used to be white. Yeah, that can happen all the time.
I don't, was Blade white?
I'm just saying, I'm giving you a hypothetical. If Blade was white, they can be bought into this. Had this culture.
Yeah, because indoctrination exists. And through indoctrination, you can appeal to the masses by simply changing their mind ever so slightly, drip feeding poison, as it were. That's the analogy that I come up with.
Expression of a black vampire existed for a very long time. Let's say that Blade was white. This generation doesn't even remember the Hogan's Heroes or any of that stuff. If Hogan's Heroes were black, they would have never known this. And we do a revamp of this of a black rendition. They'd be like, oh, okay, this is a cool show. They would have never known the swap would have happened. Thus Blade in the hypothetical. Yeah.
Which is what happened with like an actual example of this would be Nick Fury in the comics. Original Nick Fury was white. Current Nick Fury is black. How did that happen? The comics, because they used the ultimate version, the ultimate Marvel version of Nick Fury, and made him the de facto one because Sam Jackson is just that good, that monstrous of a character to portray in media. Makes sense.
Okay, so what I'm poking at, number one, I'm just trying to point out that Wesley Snipes is a personal hero of mine, and I love Blade, and I don't feel like Blade was scraps to the black community. I feel that was an authentically, earnestly told story that was just damn cool, and I wish that it was, more of that stuff was done. Same thing with like Will Smith. Will Smith's whole arc with like Men in Black and Independence Day and all that kind of stuff. What was that, like black tokenism? Was that scraps?
You're talking about characters that were started out being black and never picked up the scraps or leftovers of a white image or character. Now what we're doing is we're doing race swapping. Has Will Smith swapped a race out with another Men in Black person?
We haven't even gotten that far. I'm just trying to make sure that
that's where we're at right now. Counterpoints. I'm talking about race swapping. You're talking about like black characters being tokenized. Let's get to the race swapping, and that's my whole prime issue right now. Is that races are being swapped in real time with characters. Matter of fact, Snow White. They've even rumored to talk about this being a black character. Her name is Snow White.
That's very true. Systemic racism doesn't exist because, I keep preface. I guess it's really tacky to keep prefacing any statement with systemic racism doesn't exist because of this thing, because of this example. But legitimately, with how the majority demographic in America is white, things like Snow White, the character, would be sacred. You would not be able to touch the character like they have touched the character in today's day and age. With the modern Snow White rendition, they would not be able to. It just wouldn't happen. Not with the fact that the majority of the market in America is white, and therefore it would be catered to white people.
Skin white as snow. This can happen in real time, yet you would never have an argument against this. This is happening before our eyes, and people are buying this part and parcel. And this is also eradication of white historical culture. This is a European ideal. This has been sold to the US as far as an ideal. And now all of a sudden we're warping culture, like immigration comes in and warps our culture, that we may not even see the same ideals in 60 years from now.
I don't even think I've said anything yet. I think I've asked you about two black actors and whether or not you were aware of them. Okay, so I'm still digging into this a little bit.
I'm on the race swapping. You're on two original black characters. I'm talking about unoriginal characters as being black, taking white counterparts. It's scraps and leftovers. That's where I'm at.
Okay, so let's get there. So one of the suggestions that you had, though, which I think is pertinent to the conversation, is directly addressing something that you said, is that you said that race swapping is effectively throwing black American scraps, insulting white Americans by diluting and minimizing their culture, et cetera, et cetera. I'll just go ahead and forward the argument instead of asking you questions. So there was this movie that was recently released, and I think it was called like The Woman King or something like that. Totally dumbass movie. I hated it, historically inaccurate, et cetera, et cetera. And it was about the female warriors of Benin, played by, I think, Viola Davis. And I think it bombed at the box office as well.
That is an example of supply and demand. The market decided that the Woman King was not worthy of a dress. It was not good. People saw it, and it was not good. And word of mouth made it so that it was shown to be not good. That's not a racism thing. That's not a racism thing. It's certainly not systemic. Because people of all walks of life saw the movie and it wasn't popular.
That was an original Black story with a powerful Black female lead, et cetera, et cetera. But when it
and that's the problem, is that, you know, it's hard to come up with good Black characters these days, because what do you come up with besides, you know, African culture? Right now, there are no creatives out there that could properly portray Black culture in a way that isn't related to slavery or related to the fact that we're a minority in this country, or whatever country they are. The best version and counterpoint to this would be Black Panther, which grossed over $1 billion when it first appeared, when it first aired in 2017, I think. 2018. No, 2018 was Endgame. 2017, 2016, or something like that. It was soon, right before Civil War, right after Civil War. I think it was 2017. One of the highest grossing films, and it was black. It was black. It featured Black people, it was made by Black people, and the writing was good. It was just overall a good movie, at least to me. People liked that. So that's the counter to the Woman King claim.
Happening was because, let's face it, Black folk are only 13% of the population. They were not enough in order to get this movie to be commercially successful. And so
why did Black Panther do well?
I think that it's entirely possible for new Black characters to be, created and have a broad appeal, but they're going to have to be part of a broader picture. It's not always going to be tokenization. And then when it comes to race swaps, I guess I could just say, like, it's not. I know that you're not going to like.
So you're saying that they have to stand on their own 2 feet. They have to stand on their own merits of being characters that are good under the same standards and same, standards spoken and unspoken that white characters have to, and white characters are constantly compared to each other even. So you're saying that characters, as they are created by the minds of humans, have to stand on their own merits of being good characters or bad characters? Novel. Who would have thunk? Damn. It's almost like creating a character is tough, and it's tougher. Creating a character is tough. Damn, I couldn't imagine
Like this, but it's not existential. But yeah, is there a part of me where Snow White is a Hispanic girl and she's Germanic and Argentinian, but she's a little swarthy, and I find that weird? Yeah, sure. Heimdall being an Aryan, a Aryan Norse god, and him being a Black gentleman, is that a little weird? Yeah, sure. But what I find richer is like the thematic depth of the art. I don't think
you can have the thematic depth and still stay canonically true to the character. There is a one of the tenets, one of the philosophical quotes of it applies here, but it goes something like, claims without evidence can be excused without evidence. Now that doesn't really map 1-to-1, but it can be stretched to apply, because the whole point is, just because you can make a character, just because you can race swap a character. Oh, even better, Jeff Goldblum's character from Jurassic Park. I know that we could but I don't know that we should. That's not the exact quote, but it is the idea. It's like, I know that we can, but I don't think, and I don't think, I I know that we can, I know that we could, but I don't think that we should. Because what is the real reason behind race swapping the character and not staying true to who the character is? You could say fiction, but that logic gets thrown back with the same rationale. It's fiction, so don't change it. The rationale is it's fiction, so I can change it. It's fiction, so don't change it. For the same reason that it's fiction, you shouldn't change it. In this case, it just follows a legal through. Not legal. It follows a logical through line, a continuity, a through line of just keep it the same. And the problem truly comes into the fact that they insist that this should happen, but can never answer the question of why it should happen outside of I just want it to. Or variations of that answer. I just want it to. Which then leads to the response of, well, I don't want you to do it, so don't. It's fine as is. Why break something that isn't broken? It's not broken. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm going to be really quippy heavy because these are going to come up during the debate as I think about them and as the conversation goes, but it's going to apply, and it's going to apply very heavily. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, at least in this case.
We're here necessarily to debate like the thematic depth of Marvel, but
you can still have and that's what I'm going back to. You can still have the thematic depth. It's just you're true to the character as it was created at the time.
Reason why I'm going to show my kids that art in the future is because Heimdall is still a noble character. He's still self-sacrificial. He's still intelligent. He's still humorous. He's still this. He's still that. And so like the overall arching of the themes, what I care more in reference to art and media is, number one, is it good? Number two, are these themes themes that are worth engaging with? Number three, if it's a children's movie or a teenage movie, is this something that I want to show my kids? And I'll tell you what I'm definitely not going to do. What I'm definitely not going to do is I'm definitely not going to show my kids Thor, and I'm going to be like, oh, hey, did you know Heimdall was white? Did you know that Idris Elba?
You don't have to go out of your way. That's going out of your way to say that. My dad has done that before, where he stopped movies to try and give lessons. It's like, there's no reason for you to need to go out of your way to make this a teaching moment. To give some random trivia when you're all there to just enjoy the fucking movie. But what we're not saying is, or what is being said, is that in the creation, and that's the key here, in the creation, the lead up to you sitting down with your kids and watching the movie, we're saying don't change what it didn't need fixing. If Heimdall was white and he was kept white, you would still be sitting there with your children and watching the fucking movie and gaining and intaking all of the thematic messaging behind the character. You would still be saying that. The only difference is that Heimdall is true to his canonical comical self and is not being played by Idris Elba. That would be the only difference. And frankly, that's pretty minor.
Elba stole a white man's role? Like, what kind of fucking racial antagonist bullshit am I trying to prop up right there? Like, what the fuck are we talking about here?
So, okay, let me contend with this right now.
All right, let's see what
to me,
Marte
I don't
has
really
to
think
got.
that you even contended with that. Actually bolstered my point by mentioning the Woman King. I actually wrote a book on this called The Female Warrior Fallacy. I've been talking about wrapping this up for about a year and a half now, writing this book, still working on it right now, anyways, we can get into that later. But here's the thing, though, when you brought that up,
I'd love to dig into that.
Was fabricated and brought on black people. That never happened. You can say it's original fallacy. So that right there proves my point even more. If you're going to give us scraps and you're going to feed us lies now, you still don't really have a proven point when you're offering nothing but scraps and now lies on top of that too. When you're
and the thing about systemic racism, even to the point of being fed scraps, that was the way that it was, and it was codified in culture, language, and law. With Jim Crow and stuff like that. Jim Crow propagating this sentiment by allowing whites to have access to all the new gadgets and all the new trinkets and all the new resources and whatnot, and then blacks would get the scraps. That was culture. That was accepted because that was simply how things were at the time. But post Civil Rights Act and post all the narratives and saying we're all one country, we shouldn't look at each other, be a race and stuff like that, the communities may still have been there in the form of ghettos, but that's a separate conversation. There are black people, there are Hispanics, there are Asians that are in the same schools as these white folk that get the same materials, that have access to the same resources and opportunities as the very white folk that get the new stuff. All because they are in positions to take advantage of those resources. They're in the same schools. They're in the same workplaces. They're in the same careers. That's why we have representation in all facets of American life. So for the left to come out and say that systemic racism exists because a couple of cases were caught by the media and then propagated to the rest of the country, rest of the world, is disingenuous and is sensationalizing a problem that really is not as major as they say it is. Because the whole point of the civil rights movement was giving opportunity to those that didn't have it before. Now they do, and for some reason that's not enough because you're not seeing enough. The question and the argument turns to we need more because we need to see enough people. We need to see more of us. How much more? No specification. There's no level, there's no threshold to where more has been achieved. It was clearly when the civil rights movement was at its peak, was at its height, leading up to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, preceded by Brown versus Board of Education. The clear goal was allowing for citizens of the United States via the 14th Amendment all the same rights, liberties, and opportunities under the law and under culture and under the Constitution as white people, as white folk. Because it just wasn't happening. What Marte is saying here, being fed the scraps, is a culture thing that has, one could say, has carried over, but is what became of continuing to talk about racism as though it was it's still a major issue today. Being fed scraps, when in reality, when the key difference between back then and now is that Black people have all the same resources, have all the same access to these resources and opportunities to make their own, to make hard-hitting characters that stand on their own 2 feet. That could be cultural icons, the likes of which are rivaled by Batman, Wonder Woman, Captain America, Iron Man, and stuff like that. We have the opportunity to make our own. We're just not. And that's not a systemic racism thing. That's a look at your own culture and prop yourselves up thing. We still live in the ghettos. Yes, a lot of us still live in the ghettos, but we're being taught on a system. We're being taught. I almost said it on a systemic level, but really, we're just being taught and encouraged by media sources, primarily Democrats, to stay there. But in actuality, like we're being told psyops into thinking that we're still not enough when an entire side, the right typically, but also through codification of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that the left continues to bring up, that the left continues to mention as part of the big fight against racism. Do we have the resources there? We can attempt to do so. Poor people will exist in all societies. But what's different here is that everyone has the opportunity to pick themselves up and move into a different area. Or if they can't do that, they have the ability to make a better life for themselves if they want to, and they are determined to make it happen. That was a sentence that was not afforded to people like me 60, 70, 80 years ago. I would not be able to go out and become president of the United States like Barack Obama back in the 50s, back in the 40s, 30s, 20s, during Reconstruction and Jim Crow. I would not be able to do that because culture at the time basically said, because you're black, you can't do this. Now, funny enough, we hear that from Democrats. It's just the language is slightly different. We need to help them because it went from they can't do this because they're black to we need to help them because they're black. They need to be given these characters or else they don't have the representation. They need to get into these fields of study because the majority of them are not educated enough. So we need to fast track them into these fields of study, into these career fields, because there's just not enough of them that are making the cut. So we need some help. That's the scraps today. Those are the scraps. We're being told, things like affirmative action, and I'm starting to argue for the other side here. Is things like affirmative action are the scraps. We're not going to look at getting you into the same spots under your own merits like it has been codified in the past. It's because you have been disadvantaged. You have been historically disadvantaged because you continue to falter as a collective, even though a lot of you have succeeded. And there's plenty of you out there that are the indicators of the very thing that we are trying to fight here. Don't worry about them. You all haven't been up there, so you need some help. Here's this help. We're going to let you go in. But I don't think I'm really qualified. Oh, it doesn't matter. We'll work out the details. A la lowering standards and just fast tracking without really checking if they are qualified or not. In some way, you can argue systemic racism that way, but again, everyone's being given an opportunity to advance and succeed. Everyone, regardless of race, regardless of religion, you can take part. We are helping you to take part in American society. That's why these programs exist. That's why these laws exist. That's why we're telling people not to see race. That's why we're telling people that it's bad to be racist, that you should judge people on the content of their character and not the color of their skin. That's the colorblind society, because everybody's got a chance. Everyone has a chance to do something great with their lives. That was the point behind the civil rights movement, and it was achieved. Because look at all the representation that we have now. Look at where we are now and how much everyone loves seeing anyone from any race, of any ethnicity, being in a position of power, influence, or high regard. No one bats an eye when the next Kid Cooley gets on stage. No one bats an eye when Jasmine Crockett goes up to the pulpit in the House of Representatives. No one bats an eye when Clarence Thomas makes a makes a decision as part of the Supreme Court, or Ketanji Brown Jackson, Barack Obama, or Ben Carson and whatnot. You know, we have all of these figures, we have all of this representation in media. Idris Elba, as in this very debate, like there's representation everywhere of people who have made it, of from all walks of life. It's not that the opportunity isn't there anymore. It's not that. It's the fact that we're being actively told by people who have something to gain from this racial division that it still exists. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that we're moving into an age where that might come back. Not in the same way as it was before, but it might come back in a different way that would that is antithetical to the very thing that we grew up learning to disavow. Except it's being framed and advertised as though you are doing something good, as though you are part of a movement, a cult. It's a cult at this point, because it's gotten so bad and so extreme to the point. It's gotten so extreme that if you disagree, even if you look like them, like I do, you'll be ostracized. That's why they don't talk about Clarence Thomas. That's why they don't talk about I want to say his name is Aaron Donald, but the representative in Miami, in not Miami, but in Florida, Barron Donald, I think his name is Barron Donald. That's why they don't talk about Barron Donald. That's why they don't talk about Clarence Thomas or Ben Carson, because these are, or Thomas Sowell, because these are black people that aren't a part of the program, that aren't on their side. That's why people like Marte, get complimented by white folk to saying, I wish I could say the things that you're saying. Because these guys are not part of the cult. And because of that, they are shamed. They are shamed from the group. They are not considered as part of the group. Even though the whole point was to fight against racism and to get everybody their due opportunity and whatnot. It's backwards logic.
Using revisionist history to bolster black communities and say, this is original. Here, not only have I offered, here, have the scraps of former white characters. Now you've offered to the table Woman King. Here you go. Revisionist history, things that never happened for 500, Alex. So this is happening in the inverse, in white communities and also white colleges. They're revising history and telling whites to demonize themselves. You're the oppressors and everything else. You should hate yourself. We see this in media all the time. This propaganda is all over TikTok of whites.
I got to go to the bathroom, so give me a second, please.
saying this. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and conflate this with movies. This is history, things that never happened for 500, Alex. So this is happening in the inverse, in white communities and also white colleges. They're revising history and telling whites to demonize themselves. You're the oppressors and everything else. You should hate yourself. We see this in media all the time. This propaganda is all over TikTok of whites saying this. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and conflate this with movies. This is also being seeded in media and movies for whites to hate themselves. Whites are no longer empowered in media anymore because they can't do this. White silence has also pervaded the media when it comes to characters and everything else. No, if there's a white character and he's somewhat proud of his character, that'll never happen. Matter of fact, it's eradicated from media and everywhere else that you can see. Matter of fact, point to a movie where a guy says, you know what, I'm happy I'm Caucasian, you know, and I'm great. I'm happy because I come from European heritage. Will never freaking happen. And the reason why it can't happen is because of white silence that happens in media and television. And the reason why you can say these things like, you know what, I'll never tell my children that this is just hatred and, you know, he used to be this and that. Well, actually, you're buying into the narrative that I'm espousing the first time because they're using revisionist history. If you never clear up the history for your kids, they're bought into lies in the future. And this is what we propagate. And you're doing the same damn thing right now during this debate, and ensuring that your kids are bought into lies in the past, such as the woman king who brought up. And
This is likely what's going to happen. I was muted. This is likely what's going to happen with my debate. In that we're going to talk about things that didn't happen or things that can be explained using something that is more relevant to why it happened, not the fact that it was racist. I can't really think of a single thing that isn't because either because my feelings are bad or because of something that's more relevant to the actual incident. Like the criminal was 14 charges in before he got to this 15th, or you know, they've been released 31 times before that point, and they really should have been locked up before it got this bad. Something like that, rather than, oh, they got this is another instance of racism of a black person being persecuted or what have you, you know, a police brutality, stuff like that. There's going to be better reasons to find, as was codified through the Civil Rights Act. That's going to be a key point here, because the question that then follows is, because it's been categorically addressed in legislation and then in culture via the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, where growing up you were told not to look at people racially by the color of their skin. You were told to disavow behavior like that. You learn about it and then disavow it when you see it happen. And the fact that anyone anywhere can get into any school or any career field, what have you, numbers will not distinguish, but you can. That's the whole thing, is that you can, and people do, and people have. Especially now that schools and places and public places have been desegregated. But what's left? What are we missing? And that won't be a question that my opponent will be able to answer. It's what's missing and how do we address it? Because, again, for whatever he comes up with, it's going to be looked back on. Well, the Civil Rights Act says that's not happening. So whoever it is can file a complaint. That's why we have Title VII. That's why we have the EEOC. That's why we have civil rights cases at this time. You could say culturally, but again, that's not really systemic racism, because there's groups out there, prominent groups that get into the media, that get into you know, the public eye, the public sphere, that will advocate for them. There's an advocacy group for any group in this country that will gain traction and will have followers. Systemic racism would mean that it would propagate one race over all others, and that just isn't happening.
saying, no, this character, I'm never going to bring up the fact that they're really white or anything like that. And guess what happens? It erodes history. And over time, 60 years from now, if you sit in front of your kids and tell them lies from the history or lies from revisionist tales enough, now all of a sudden we have a different America and different culture and media and movies than we had before. And guess what? Movies are extremely powerful. People are emboldened. Matter of fact, Rosewood came out and people wanted to burn cities down when that came out. This is powerful. And also narratives that we give to populations to seed our communities with ideals. Now we're ruining these ideals and we're telling whites to be ashamed of themselves because we're eradicating them from cinematic media and movies and everywhere else.
Okay. We do agree that there were female warriors in the slave kingdom of Benin, though, right? That's factually true.
I wouldn't call
I don't care.
them warriors. I wrote a whole book. We can get into this. I'm not sure you want to. This is like a.
Doesn't matter. This is a non sequitur.
A king's bodyguard, an armed concubine bodyguard.
You realize why they were bodyguards, right? The reason why they were bodyguards is because when they had male bodyguards, they tend to have infidelity that happens. So in order to eradicate infidelity, they turned them into women. And matter of fact, they weren't even good at that. These women weren't even good bodyguards. They were just proven to show. It was like a show of force. And all of this was, matter of fact, you were an officer just like I was. All this was is just officer presence at the most. It wasn't a really effective tool. Really. This was just a show of force and nothing more, because when they really got into it, they didn't really prove the test of time. They really weren't good warriors. All they were was just stating off infidelity against the wife. That's the only reason why. And I wouldn't even call them warriors. That's why I would debunk all this.
Okay, no, shit. If you want to attack the trope of the warrior females of Benin, I mean, have at it. I'm perfectly fine with it.
I mean,
it doesn't stand up. It just doesn't stand up. It doesn't stand up to culture. Like it didn't stand up back then. It doesn't stand up now.
You talked for a while, so I would like an opportunity. To talk for a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
The reason why I'm bringing this stuff up, though, okay, is because number one, we're talking about whether or not whites are more oppressed in society. I do understand stories have power, but I don't feel like your perception of stories are fully correct. So when we come to like pop culture, I think what we're really trying to reinforce is we're trying to reinforce multi-ethno-religious, multicultural liberalism, probably colorblind liberalism to a degree. If you go into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is obviously very popular over the past couple of decades, you got Nick Fury. He's a badass. He's a hero. I think he was race swapped. You got Heimdall. He was race swapped. You got female. You got Black Widow, who's like this badass female super spy. You got her own spin-off movie that's not as popular as the male stuff.
Because that could be explained by the fact that it came out after or right after Infinity War, right after Endgame. It should have been before. The Black Widow movie should have came out before Endgame. But that's something different.
But like white men are still like front and center. Captain Steve Rogers is still like probably one of the Captain Rogers, and not just that, but Tony Stark are probably like the thematic heart of the Marvel Cinematic Universe all the way through Endgame.
And they died. And now look at where they are.
And so I still think there's plenty of like white male straight heroes that are even within like the progress, if you want to call it like goy slop, it's still there. And then not just that, there are good racial stories told. As an example, a recent example, Devotion. Devotion was a movie set in the Korean War where it's effectively the first black naval aviator. This is a true story. He becomes boys with his wingman, despite all the racism that was common at the time. The racism that he faced was well documented. And what ended up happening was this black naval aviator was providing close air support during the Chosin Reservoir. He was shot down, and his white wingman, who had come to love him as a brother over the years of service, actually crashed his plane intentionally, trying to save his brother from a different race, and then evacuated his corpse because the black gentleman unfortunately ended up dying. So like I agree with you that there's slop all over the place. I agree with you that some of the race mixing, or not race mixing, the race swaps are uncomfortable, but I also think that there's beautiful stories here. And
just because you have some good and you have some bad doesn't mean that the overall sentiment of, well, let's just change it. Why? Well, just because we can. It doesn't really matter that you're taking representation away. You'll still get the thematic messaging. You'll still get it. That's not the point. The point is you're changing something unnecessarily. And for what? What does it serve? And that's the question that can't be answered. That it doesn't serve. And the answer is that it doesn't serve anything other than it makes you feel good. And frankly, I've had about enough of feelings over facts, feelings over continuity. My feelings should take hold, should take precedence over the logical continuity of keeping things as they were created. You want to talk about artists and art want to talk about staying true to fiction or staying true to the continuity. And it's like, I agree. So why change it? There's no reason to change it before. There certainly isn't a reason to change it after the fact. So why change it? Just stick to what works. Stick to what worked. If it wasn't working and you wanted to try something different to try and either save the image or to come at it from a different angle, that would be more understandable. But when shit wasn't a problem before, why make it one? And that is the clear question.
You're kind of like missing them.
No, I'm not missing any of that. And the reason why I'm saying that this is really bad, and I'm going to demonstrate this for you right now. I grew up in a black household. The problem with the black household that we grew up in during that time is I saw a photo of Jesus in dreadlocks. Like, well, shit you not, this happened, right? And then when we look back at history that's being revised, religion's being revised by race, everything else is being revised. And we talk about, I would say Metatron's had a channel on this, and we talk about the Egyptians. Jada Pinkett had a special on this saying that the Egyptians were black. No, maybe 2% sub-Saharan African, but we're bought into this. And this is integrating into our classrooms and kids' studies and everything like that. Guess what's happening? This is weeding out white culture in revising history. Once you've never actually contended with this argument about revisionist history, which is happening in real time. And then not once did I say that we're whitewashing, we're eliminating white atrocities that happen. Not once did I even utter that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is revising history is to where it never happened. And then blacks were, matter of fact, there's a whole movement right now saying that Benjamin Franklin was black, believe it or not. And believe it or not, with the way that culture is going right now, kids are going to be taught that Benjamin Franklin was black 60 years from now, the way that things are going right now. You may say that this is ineffective as far as kids, but it is.
We live in the information age. So for instance, like we know Cleo.
We live in the information age, but information that's not directed is ineffective. If you don't direct people to the right information, they're just going to accept anything as fact. Without we live in the information age, but without direction to what the right information is that they're talking about, you continue to propagate revisionist history.
Cleopatra was a
Yet flat earthers exist, and we live in a flat free agent age.
Right. Cleopatra was a Ptolemy. She's of Macedonian descent. We know that the Egyptians are North African, and they're ethno-religiously different than sub-Saharan Africans. And arguably, the Africans, the darker-skinned Africans who ruled Egypt very temporarily, were the Nubians. And we know this, like, historically. And they only ruled, like, they were only 2 pharaohs out of hundreds or thousands of years of history. So all of this stuff, like, at least as far as I'm concerned, Jada Pinkett Smith is a dumbass who should not have been given a Netflix series. But I'm not going to go around finding every single dumbass e-celebrity with an axe to grind when the good information is not only still out there, it's still being taught at the college level. I mean, I went to college maybe 10 years ago now, so maybe it's been wokeified since. But, you know, when I went to my West African history class, they weren't teaching us, you know, the whites, they came here and raped and murdered everybody. And as a result, that's why Africa was fucked up. What they actually taught was the historical process of colonization, where, do you know,
these absolutist arguments are going to, they're going to do me in, because that's never has been what has been the case. Yet it always comes up because that's what they always think, is that it can either be one or the other. There is no nuance. There just isn't any nuance, and this is leftists everywhere. What nuance? What the fuck is that? It's either it's all black or it's not black, and it's like, why can't there be, you know, why can't it be some and some this and not some of that? You know, like a complex character.
Do you know how African slaves were mostly sold in the west coast of Africa? Like, do you think like the white people with nets went into the heart of the continent and just started randomly kidnapping people?
And we can get into this as well too. I mean, here's the thing.
We're probably going to agree, but if you want to elucidate it, please go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll even give you a hypothetical. Let's say that I was on a slave ship and I wanted a bunch of blacks. I would never use guns or ammo or any kind of nomenclature to do this. What I would do is I would talk to the black people themselves and say, hey, listen, you're big and strong. I need you to rally up these other people and do this. Matter of fact, we're going to give you the best technology of the time. And it was the gun, right? So when we have this gun, we're going to say, okay, this is the best tech that we have. We're going to have you take these other blacks. I already fully know well how this happened. And matter of fact, this leads to like the whole Warrior King. I think it's the Woman King thing and all that other stuff.
Yeah, Benin was one of the largest.
I can't even concede this
in West Africa.
I can't even concede this. So here's the thing, though. That doesn't contend with any of my points as far as revisionist history when we talk about the culture. And our kids are eating this up in schools. All this is being revised before our eyes. Whites are actually being taught in classroom that in some semblances, in some cases, I can give you 3 case studies of where they're taught that they should dislike themselves and they're inherently racist upon birth. Whites are inherently racist upon birth. This is being told in classrooms and everywhere else. And you're talking about white academia being woke? No, this goes down to the elementary level as well, too. This is being taught all throughout. So this is eradication of white culture.
So let me tell you my solution on the pop culture front, and then maybe we can move into education and we can talk about.
I would love to hear what you have to say on white culture and out and what the solution is. Is it anything that can be actionable, concrete, empirical, and demonstrable?
Solutions, okay? Because this is actually relatively, no, it's not relatively, it actually is interesting. So for me, what seems like has happened over the past decade is
Wait. Did you say that I have a solution for me? Okay.
It's down to the elementary level as well too. This is being taught all throughout. This is eradication of white culture.
So let me tell you my solution on the pop culture front, and then maybe we can move into education and we can talk about solutions, okay? Because this is actually relatively, no, it's not relatively, it actually is interesting. So for me, what seems like has happened over the past decade is I would say that woke peaked, okay, in my opinion, because they did obnoxious shit. They did obnoxious shit like the Woman King. They lost a shitload of cash. They did things like race swapping with Ariel and all these live action adaptations. I'm pretty sure they broke even or lost money on some of these things. And so as a result, like woke has kind of like, hit its crest. And not just that, when you look at pop culture now, they're bringing things back like, I don't know, white straight male action heroes being the unapologetic protagonist.
Only because culture is shifting to where that's become okay again. Again, look to Expedition 33. You know, games like Expedition 33, which have all white cast, and notice who's seething when shit like that happens. It's not the whites, it's not Asians, it's not the sane. The sane don't get mad at Expedition 33. The insane get mad at Expedition 33 for its casting.
And I just mean, like, I see Glenn Powell commercials every other day, and he's a white man with blonde hair and blue eyes. And we also see Sydney Sweeney with her huge tatas, and she's blonde.
This recency bias argument is so apt. It's so apt for how much these people don't see beyond what's right in front of them. They only take the most recent fucking examples, and they talk about history as though history is omnipotent. History is all encompassing. It's this shadow, it's this gigantic cloud. It's this gigantic cloud that hovers around society as a whole, that because it rains on you, you are thus affected at all times. But when it comes to actually trying to make an argument for either the other side or trying to make an argument on the such, all of a sudden there's an umbrella over them, and only what's under the umbrella is what's affected. And it's like, bro, you just talked about how the rain was making you all wet and how it was uncomfortable and annoying and whatnot. Yet now that you suddenly put up your umbrella that they had this whole time, by the way. They put up this umbrella, and now that you're all of a sudden dry, suddenly everyone else is the problem for talking about how they're annoyed with the rain when none of them have umbrellas none of them have umbrellas or had umbrellas to begin with. You could give them the umbrellas. Hell, there's an umbrella rack right there. There's an umbrella rack right there that you can all pick up your umbrellas, but some people can't. Some people are not allowed and they don't know that the umbrella rack is there. You could tell them that the umbrella rack is there, but you'd rather say that people are ignorant and that people should just know that there's an umbrella rack right there when it's not clear to some people. And it's like, well, this rain is all encompassing. This rain has been here for a while and it's gotten everyone annoyed. Yeah, there's some umbrellas right there, but they don't know that. And, you know, why should I be the one to tell them that when they should already know that the umbrellas are right there? I have one. Clearly, they should know that it exists. And it's like, you're not helping your fellow man with this.
With blue eyes, you know, it's shifted a little bit. Even the Barbie movie, which is
it's recency bias. It's not like they act as though the last 5 years just didn't happen, and it's like the last 8 years just didn't exist. It's a clean slate. Just all because Trump got into office, suddenly the last 5 to 8 to 10 years just didn't happen. They does not exist. But what does exist? The last 5 years, the last year of Trump's presidency. This recency bias is mind-boggling. I don't have the words to truly describe how asinine it is.
The most feminist movies of the past decade ultimately made a critique of the masculine, how masculine society is bad for men, but also like the ultra feminist society is bad for men as well. So like things are kind of like moving, I would say, in a more productive direction. And so when it comes to pop culture, don't watch the bad shit, reward the good stuff with your money, and it seems like this is getting balanced out.
This works out when the culture shifts to one that's more balanced. Right now, it's not balanced. So you can't say that. Not entirely. Because there are other factors that are involved, such as the cultural zeitgeist being so much against white people and demonizing white culture to such a degree that the general sentiment is you can't be proud to be white.
Out in recent times. But it seems like you still think that we're in like a woke deluge.
No, this isn't happening. Matter of fact, you've traded out one thing that's subversive for another. You've not once told me how any of this is like good. Matter of fact, you've never conceded with my arguments. Matter of fact, here's the thing that I'll even tell you right now. Not only is pop culture still going full steam ahead with this, even though they're losing at the box office, I'll even grant you that. And these are things that are happening culturally. Here's the other thing that's happening right now. History, which I talked about, which is portrayed in movies, is culturally being bastardized as far as white history. I'm still waiting to hear an argument how this is. Matter of fact, you haven't even denied that this is happening. You're saying that there's a slowing down of this happening just because people aren't buying into this. And you do this really sneaky stuff where you're slipping in characters, which it's like, I get it, Black Widow, she was never black. So that's like you did that, and then we're going to go into this.
She was a woman, not sexist, so don't take it personal.
Right, but here's the thing, though, that has nothing to do with my argument.
My solution is, I was raised in a free society in which people with shitloads of cash could make movies and do whatever the fuck they wanted to do, and the market would, reward and punish them.
Yes, Spike Lee. And the guy who made Get Out, Jordan Peele. Yeah, Spike Lee, Jordan Peele.
According to what was viable. So my question to you is, let's just say for the sake of argument, because by the way, once again, I'm not like a huge like woke or whatever, okay? Let's say you're right, all right? Progressive culture has infected pop culture. It's annoying as shit. It's in our face. It's trying to shame cis heterosexual white Christian males for being cis heterosexual white Christian males. I said my solution is let the free society criticize and let the flops.
This is letting the markets happen, completely dismissing all of the propaganda that's been associated with why we're in this situation to begin with. Just let the market of ideas do all the work. And it's like, yeah, that would work, and it does work. However, you are ignoring the propaganda aspect of the last 10 to 15 years and how hard they pushed that shit. So yeah, let the free market of ideas work out, which means you take the propaganda out of it. You take the money out of it and you just let the marketplace of ideas either rise or fall.
Flop at the box office. What's your solution?
My solution is acceptance the other way around, because we have examples of pop culture. Nick Fuentes couldn't even mount these things a while ago. We're kind of progressing in a better generation. That's because our administration has changed a whole lot. I guarantee you, if Biden got like a third term, something like that happened, he wouldn't be on Piers Morgan espousing these ideas. As a matter of fact, I'm going to point to another thing before I get to the solution that I'm going to offer right now. So when he talked about this, he was being demonized for spouting facts, saying that if I want...
His Nick Fuentes' platform would have been nuked on site if Biden had gotten a second term and we were still in the culture where wrongthink was bad and should be taken as hate speech, as something threatening, like they did with Charlie Kirk, and said and acted upon getting rid of this to make sure that he could not influence. He would have been nuked on site for the kinds of views that he has. The only reason that he hasn't is the fact that culture has shifted enough for someone like him to thrive.
you know, to move to a white community because I want less violence and I want to survive. How is this, you know, not a fact? Yet everybody, even including white people, are railing against him and saying that he's a blatant racist for saying this. Not the fact that he said, yeah, I'm a racist. I believe he was trolling when he said this. But here's the thing, though, just saying that, now you're racist because you want to espouse facts and data. You can't even do this in movies. That's why they're warping the agenda to where every script doesn't have anybody in white. I would say, we would say whites are, you know, oppressed in a way to where they can't be factual when we talk about movies, or they can't even espouse things like, you know what, I'm proud of my European ancestry. You'll never see that. And I've said that before. You've never reconciled that as well, too. So that's white silence that happens in media and movies. Like, that's why I'm here, Counterpoints, is because if we had switched places right now, you would be demonized for saying everything that I'm saying right now. That's oppression.
Okay, but you don't, hold on. So what I've done in my small realm of the universe, okay, is I've embraced the villain. So as an example, the Avatar movies, okay, $1 billion each. It's effectively a Native American allegory. It's about it's mixed race. It's mixed race colonial Marines going to a foreign planet and kicking the shit out of alien Native Americans. Now, because it's a James Cameron movie and you can't have the bad guys win, of course, what ends up happening is the Native Americans come back and they, you know, take their dreadlocks and they have.
You know, I wish movies these days was just as simple as, well, they're the bad guys, so the bad guys lose. But people today are too sophisticated for such simple concepts and cliches that we don't get just, oh, they're the bad guys and the bad guys have to lose. No, everyone's gotta be a three-dimensional character. They gotta be complex and misunderstood, and man, they just have a really bad background, so man, that's why they're bad. But I can sympathize with them, even though I don't really like agree with their metrics. But maybe in a different way, if they had just yada 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 yada, just needless complexity when we could have had something like Jack. What's his name from Puss in Boots 2? Jack Horner, I think his name is. What's his name? Jack Horner. Did I get it right? Holy shit. Big Jack Horner. Oh my god. I remember. I even remember even though I don't remember. That's hilarious. That's great. Yeah, even though we can have characters like Jack Horner just be unabashedly evil and be cool about it. He's the bad guy. He has to be evil, and therefore he has to lose. Like, we can have that. I wish stories were just more simple like that. Again. But because that's cliche and that's been done before, suddenly it's bad. When it's not. It's just a trope. And it works.
Sex with fish, and then, you know, they beat the mercenaries or whatever. But the entire time I'm watching that movie, I'm cheering for the Marines who are kicking the fuck out of the Native Americans. So, but my question to you is, so I've said, I'm going to vote with my dollar. I'm going to vote with my attention. I don't think this is existential. We're talking about pop culture. I do want to move to education because I think education is important.
I can actually
but I want to ask you, like, what is your solution?
Here's my solution.
Because the progressives are still infested in Hollywood. Social media companies seem to be going where the wind blows. They're sucking up to Donald Trump right now, but let's be real. The second a Democrat gets back into office, they'll probably be sucking up to a Democrat. So what's your solution in a free society to reduce the amount of woke bullshit in pop media?
Maybe you not being on your bastardized side right now, arguing against your own kind. Because this is what I'll say.
I don't think I did. I just said I don't like woke bullshit, but I like living in a free.
There is a difference between not liking what you're seeing and then advocating for it and then actively saying otherwise. Man, these pauses are diabolical. There's a difference between just saying I don't like them to actively going against them when you see it and speaking up for them. He's not speaking up for them. He's not speaking up in favor of them. Now, this is a debate and he's on the against side, but I have reason to believe and feel that Connor believes what he says. But there is an active, ardent difference between saying I don't like it and then actively speaking out against it. Counterpoints is not actively speaking out against it. He's just stating I don't like it. He's not going to do anything about it. I don't like it. You know, it just feels weird. It does fuck all.
You asked me for a solution, did you not?
Yeah,
okay, let's get back to the solution. I'm going to give you the solution right now. The solution is your voice and you talking, because fighting against white silence is a solution. Because if we're outspoken on media and moving the needle on debates instead of being silent and accepting the fact that you're saying something like, if there's the white history of a character, we're just going to go ahead and turn it black, and I'm just not going to educate my children about.
Say that is bad. Say that you should not do that and ask why you should. That's how you fight that. That's how you combat that actively. Whenever it tries to prop itself up, you say, wait a minute, why are we doing this? Does this need to happen? And if it's not, and if it doesn't meet a criteria of it should happen because of some rationale that makes sense, don't know what it is, but usually it's, you know, oh, this character's not really doing hot, let's do something different, then it shouldn't change. And you should actively look at, and you should actively look and say that, why are we trying to change this? Really? That's the reason? No. Don't. We don't need to do that. Just don't try to do that. When you do that and you gatekeep decisions and say no, then you're actually doing something.
Division is history. To me, you're just conceding to this, and to me, that's a form of immigration ideologically that you're allowing your kids to espouse.
It's there's a better term for this than what Marte said. It's not immigration. It's resignation, surrender. That's silent. That's basically resignation and acceptance that you're giving ground. It's resignation. It's surrender. You're surrendering to the influence. You're surrendering to the tactics when you don't say anything. When you don't speak up like this, you're surrendering.
And not fighting against this. That's what you're doing. If you're anti that, that's a solution. It starts from the home. And if you don't start from the home, guess what happens? What you allow is what will continue counterpoints. That's a solution. It starts from the home. If you don't have your kids accept revisionist history and you tell them the truth, because honest reality, right there, that's a solution right there. And it starts from the home. That's one out of 50 solutions I can give you.
Okay. I would love to move into education. I'll be real. I would rather take my balls, put them on this table, and smash them with a ball ping hammer than
That's wild. This is crazy. Why would bro say this? Basically, what he's saying is that not only will I surrender to this ideology, but I will actively let it through. I will open the door and let them all through. And I will be a bitch. I will be the very doormat that they step on me. That they step on as they walk into my house and do whatever they want while inside. Man, this is oof.
Fate, Black Ariel, or Black Heimdall.
Then to tell your kids the truth about history, historical narratives?
Yeah, I would rather smash my testicles with
That's a crazy take.
That is a crazy
You're just going to transgender yourself for your kids.
Let's talk about education. I want to talk about
you want to cut your balls off to lie to your kids. That's crazy.
Saying, I'm going to be the doormat. You can use me however you like. Man, that is some bitch-made... That is a bitch-made stance to take.
I'm just saying that would be less painful.
Do you identify as a woman right now because you lie to your kids?
Little
Is that the next belief system you want to integrate in your kids?
Okay, I don't give a fuck about Black Little Mermaid. So
obviously you do to cut your balls off.
So I already have my kids.
I got into education because obviously you want. I hate white blue-eyed children.
I have two white blue-eyed children. I'm doing okay. So anyway, yes, let's move into education. So when it comes to education, what's happened in my opinion, this is my frustration with the right wing right now, is that through gutting the DOE, through encouraging people to homeschool, through encouraging people to leave the public school system, effectively what they've done is they've conceded the ground. Not only have they conceded the ground when it comes to education,
he's conceded the ground on this issue by saying he would by saying he wouldn't say anything.
They also bully right-wingers and conservatives who want to get into education because they say, oh, why would you want to be a teacher? Why would you want to be a professor? Why would you want to be in academia when you could...
Why would you teach our kids wrong think? Why would you teach our kids to think for themselves? Give them a different perspective. That is wrong. That should not be allowed. How dare they? We can't indoctrinate our kids if someone who thinks differently is among our cast. We can't raise an entire generation of drones that all think like us when you have other people that think differently, that tell them to be themselves, to be individuals, and to question life like a smart and informed citizen would. We can't allow that to happen.
Either work the trades or be a business person or something like that. So conservatives, in my opinion, over the past 20 or 30 years, have lost the educational institution because they effectively retreated from it. And now the Trump administration is making it worse. So if we have these things where there's a historical problem, where something is being, I don't know, some teacher is using Jada Pinkett Smith as a historical reference or something like that, there isn't a conservative in there to say, bullshit, this is wrong.
This is where this man, Connor, is incorrect. It's been retreated because conservatives have been actively targeted. You look back, like, have been actively targeted. They've only retreated out of survival. They've only retreated because a conservative would do his normal thing. He would be conservative in his class, or he would focus on his class, but for some reason, because he doesn't think like the rest of the teachers that would all be Democrat or all be left-leaning or all just be far left, one of his antics would be taken out of context, and then he would be thrown out of the institution because of some trumped up charges that didn't exist before he or she got thrown out. He held some beliefs that people didn't like. They felt threatened, and they filed a complaint with HR and then got that guy out of there. He's blaming he's victim blaming. Essentially, he's victim blaming by blaming the very people that were told to get out of these institutions, or else they will face HR complaints and cases for rightfully leaving the area so that they can keep their innocence, so that they can keep their jobs, careers, and reputation. He's blaming the victims of the very culture that set out to cast them aside.
Here's the real history.
Okay.
So what do you think is, I want to ask you this. What do you think is happening, and how would you like to fix it?
Before we get to this, you just uttered that Trump is making things worse. I'd like to hear how, because I'm not just going to accept this and bite this bullet that you're just going to tell me that Trump is making things worse for academia. I'd love to hear how. Before we get to your question.
By gutting the DOE and not coming up with a federal curriculum, what he's doing is he's passing the curriculum back to the states. When it goes back to the states, red states might be able to do more red shit, but blue states are going to do more blue shit. So you think that it's like obnoxious now with progressive academia? Just wait until the federal government isn't regulating it at all. California is going to do all of the shit that you're talking about, and probably worse.
Do you think California would have improved had Trump not given it to the states? Do you think Newsom wouldn't have fought him?
I think that conservatives should have given their fucking balls a tug, and they should have fought for the institution instead.
No, that doesn't answer my. Can you answer my fucking question?
What do I think that? Sorry, ask the question again.
Oh gosh, I need you to listen real quick. Counterpoints. Do you think that if Trump had said, we're not giving it to the states, do you think?
So, I'm listening to this. I'm listening to this debate. I'm listening to this show about white people being oppressed, and that's different from the debate topic that I am going to be talking about tomorrow. But it's related because it's all about systemic racism. It's all about, institutionalized racism, which is its previous terminology before it became systemic in the 2000s and 2010s. At least when I was growing up, it was institutionalized racism before I kept hearing it as systemic racism. And then it was they called it systemic racism, and there was systemic racism in bits and pieces as a synonym, but it was mainly institutionalized racism before the common terminology being systemic racism today. And systemic racism today could not exist as it was back then. Could not exist without the without Reconstruction being a thing, Jim Crow laws and segregation being legalized and whatnot with Plessy versus Ferguson, which kicked off the whole thing. To where, black, minorities could not advance in American society. It could not advance in American society at the same rate as whites. They're contemporary whites. You had some representatives that were black. You got your Webb Du Bois and Scott Jackson. Nope. Frederick Douglass. Yeah. And your Frederick Douglasses and whatnot as like contemporaries alongside their white counterparts. But their ladder of success was limited because they would actively hit a legislative cultural wall, the glass ceiling, as it were. They'd only be able to rise up so far into society before they stopped, because anything higher than this point was whites only. They were not afforded the opportunity to do better, to get higher. But through the civil rights movement, through the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act through the 14th Amendment, Brown versus Board of Education, and eventually the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and all of the propaganda and all of the narrative and all of the teaching in academia saying, don't be racist. Don't see your fellow American for the color of their skin, but see them for the content of their character, what they do, what they bring to the table. All of that went away. The systemic portion of the racism went away. Categorically. First in the decision, first with the 14th Amendment saying that if you were living here if you were living here as a former slave, you now have access of being a citizen of the United States. You can now be a United States citizen under the U.S. Constitution. Yeah, it was an amendment. We kind of had to slip you guys in there, but that is the first step. That was the first step. In fact, I think I'm going to end it here. But that was the first step. You have the 14th Amendment that basically said, you had the Three-Fifths Compromise, but again, that was a period of clash. That was a period where, because of the sudden change in culture, because of the sudden change in legislation, and it wasn't really a natural thing it wasn't a natural thing at the time. There was going to be pushback initially, because that's essentially forcing change onto a population. It wasn't natural. Then you had Plessy versus Ferguson. That's the case that kicked off Jim Crow and the segregation era, where basically separate but equal. That was what became a separate but equal and all the Jim Crow laws, which led to the Civil Rights Act, the Civil Rights Movement in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, especially in the 50s, which set out to fix the lack of opportunity that was granted to black people the same as whites. You could be on the same level intellectually, career-wise, academically. You could be on the same level, but just not reach those same heights. And to be fair, black people were getting through this simply by sticking together, much like Asians are today, much like Hispanics, much like Muslims and stuff. They were staying together and were prospering through that adversity. Eventually, we would have made our own versions and been on the same height. Yeah, we would have been encroaching on the territory of whites, but that's what happens throughout human history. That being said, having choice is not a bad thing. Being able to choose between your own folk between your own resources or someone else's resources within the same country, by the way, never really saw that as a bad thing. And the civil rights movement didn't either. You can argue the not the points. You can argue the spirit and or you can argue the nuances of what the Civil Rights Movement and the Civil Rights Act really accomplished for minorities all over the country today. The ramifications of that entire movement and what it showed and what it got us long after the fact. But when it came to combating systemic racism and the fact that in society, in American society, if you looked a certain way, you were treated a certain way, and it was normal in society, to the point where people's opportunities were stymied due to that. They couldn't get to the places of prominence because they were black. It needed to go. If we were all Americans, it should not matter what you look like. Just because I want to get into a high-end school like this and get out of the slums that I'm currently in, I should be allowed to do that. That was the whole point of the civil rights movement. I should be allowed because I too am an American. You could see that as natural integration over time as people continue to get together. And the Civil Rights Movement, the Civil Rights Act, essentially was more accelerationism, which faced, resistance initially, and desegregation and stuff like that, but afforded the same opportunities as fellow whites. That was good. And all of this led to basically the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which codified that you can't discriminate based on race. The whole point that law was made was to directly and definitively address systemic racism. And with its passing, desegregation was banned. Or it's not desegregation, but segregation was banned. You couldn't do it anymore. You can't say that a certain person could or could not do something in America because they are of a certain race. You could not say that. You had to come up with something different, or else you had a case on your hands. It was at that point where the roads to any part of American society was open to everyone. It would take a few decades to reach a point of not consensus, not coalescence. Togetherness sounds really a point of togetherness, I guess, to where it would be normalization, a point of normalization. It would take a couple of decades to normalize this sense. To normalize the sentiment, but it happened because it was after that point when schools became desegregated that the concept of everyone has an opportunity and everyone can make it for themselves really started to take hold. And with that message as the driving force for why the Civil Rights Act was passed, and the main messaging of the Civil Rights Act, you're all American, thus you have access to anything an American has under the Constitution of the United States. You are afforded all advantages, resources, and opportunities. Should you choose to, you can make it, and there ain't no one that can stop you from doing so. That there is why systemic racism ended with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. You can argue the spirit of what the larger ramifications of the act have done since its passing, but you can't argue the spirit of what it set out to accomplish, which was the dismantling of systemic racism, the dismantling of the fact that only a certain demographic of people, a certain race, a certain ethnicity of people were allowed all of these resources. We're allowed to have all of these resources. New, fresh, the most hip, not the most hip, but the most up-to-date resources and opportunities. But these other people can't because they're of a different color, even though we all live under the same banner of the United States of America? No. So we grew up to disavow racism and more importantly to call it out when it happened. But somewhere along the lines we lost track. We lost track that racism comes in many different forms. Not the blatant you can't do something, but the other side, the more sinister side, not the negative confrontational aspect of it that it was before. But the Nostradamus version, the slowly poisoned toxic positivity version of we need to help you because you need help. It wasn't stopping you, because that's blatant. That is in your face. You notice that, but you don't notice the silent poison that you don't notice the roofie that was put into your drink when you had your head turned. You don't notice the water getting hot while you're taking a hot bath. The water getting hotter and being boiled alive. That is the real reason why systemic racism continues to be an issue. It's because at this point, there are groups that have much to gain from its existence, from its continued conversation. That's the only reason why the Civil Rights Act of 1964 didn't categorically get rid of it, even though that's what it set out to do and that's what it accomplished. We just didn't see the effects of it really taking hold until about two generations later. So I want to end off because I gotta go to bed. I'm going to destroy this debate. It may be my first time debating a 1v1. But I'm confident because needless to say, but history's on my side. Logic is on my side. Facts are on my side. I'm going to go into there confident. I don't know what's going to happen. It is a conversation first and foremost. A conversation. And it's a conversation that needs to happen from this side. And I'm excited, I'm anxious, but I'm determined. I can't wait. I can wait. I will be waiting, but I do need to lock in, and I will lock in and have this conversation because it needs to be had. And I'm tired of staying silent on it. I'd rant to myself about these various things that I would watch, but now I'm in the thick of it. I'm putting myself into the thick of it. And it needs to happen. I'm going to start my own streams tomorrow before the debate so I can shake off the nerves, because now I'm comfortable now. Can't do this while I'm talking and gaming. That's something different entirely, but we'll get there the more that I do this. But I will do this and will stream my own side, at least stream my own side. And I need to figure out how to switch scenes to where I whatever. I'm going to go to bed now because I need to wake up really early for work tomorrow. But for anyone that happens to see this as a VOD, welcome. This is Tomahawk. I am on this channel. I do debates. Well, yeah. I talk about stuff. I have my own thoughts. Typically, I'd be gaming, but I'm doing something different. And I'm going to start, and this is the start of something great. There's some mindset changes that I need to go through, that I'm going through right now, but I will be doing this more. So tune in tomorrow. I'm going to have it on YouTube. I'm going to have it on Twitch. And yeah, let's do this thing. Thank you very much. You have a great day. And I'll see you guys tomorrow on SpeakEazy stream in my own. All right, have a good one. Let's see if in the beginning I finish this debate off, and then just get ready. Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.